Can I start? Dear members, before we begin, let me remind you that this meeting is being recorded and is broadcasted on the OSCE's social media platforms and website. The list of speakers for our open debate is closed. We have 66 members registered to speak. Members will be asked to limit their interventions to 2 minutes maximum. I plan on opening the debate at 10 o'clock at the latest. I will therefore also limit responses under agenda item 3. I also kindly ask members reporting under item 3 to limit their interventions as much as possible. Despite our efforts, it is likely that we will run out of time for this debate. Therefore, it is possible that not everyone who had signed up in advance will be given the floor. However, every delegation who has signed up at least one speaker will be given the opportunity to speak. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Dear members, we first go to item number 1 in the agenda, which is adoption of the agenda. A draft agenda has been circulated. Can we adopt the agenda? The agenda is adopted. Then we go to item number 2, which is the address by the President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Dear members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here in Vienna, the very fabric of European security is being tested by Russia's aggression. All our countries are taking the threat seriously. Many of you have warned of it for years. In Ukraine, years of subversive action has become a full-scale invasion. Threats have become reality. We are 10 years since the illegal annexation of Crimea and 2 years into the largest European conflict since the Second World War. This is a pivotal moment in history. Our institutions are being tested. We are responding, albeit not always decisively. But as we acknowledge our shortcomings, we must make sure that we can rely on the pillars of our international system in the long term. Europe's security landscape has always been in movement. Although some periods have been a source of optimism, we have always fallen short of fulfilling the vision of a peaceful area of cooperation from Vancouver to Vladivostok. Yet, there is this shared belief that by working together we can achieve comprehensive security. Your high levels of engagement in all facets of our work prove it. At the heart of the OSCE's mission lies the commitment to dialogue, cooperation and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. These principles have guided our actions for decades, but our dedication to dialogue has never entailed compromising the core values upon which the OSCE was first established. These values are non-negotiable. We therefore must take every measure to safeguard them across all dimensions of security. This morning, we have the opportunity to debate a topic of great importance: European security today and tomorrow, parliamentary perspectives on the future of the OSCE. I hope that our discussion this morning will feed into a broader discussion about the future of the OSCE and our Parliamentary Assembly. As we look to the future, we must acknowledge one factor which has precipitated the destruction of European security today: the erosion of trust. In an era marked by open armed conflict, disinformation and hybrid warfare, building trust and confidence among our countries seems like an impossible task. Yet it is precisely in times of uncertainty that we must redouble our efforts to foster dialogue through our shared commitment to the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. The war in Ukraine will necessarily continue to dominate our political agenda. The persistent tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia and the continued occupation of regions of Georgia by the Russian Federation underscore the need for concerted international attention to transform the South Caucasus in an area of peace and prosperity. High-level engagement is also needed to advance the Transnistrian settlement process. Throughout the OSCE area, and particularly in the Western Balkans and Central Asia, dialogue must prevent escalation. Our security landscape is also being reshaped by emerging challenges, including cyber threats and disinformation. These defy the traditional notions of security and require a comprehensive, multidimensional response. As parliamentarians, we must work together to strengthen our collective resilience by enhancing our cybersecurity capabilities and proactively countering propaganda. In charting the future of the OSCE, we must also reaffirm our commitment to the principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. These principles are the bedrock of our shared values and aspirations. As parliamentarians, we have a duty to uphold these principles in our own countries and advocate for their promotion throughout the OSCE region. The death of Alexei Navalny is a cruel reminder of the sacrifices made by those opposing totalitarianism. All our countries face different challenges. We have different cultures, different histories, and different perceptions of threats even. As members of this assembly, we must use such opportunities to bridge our points of view and find common ground. Our debates must serve to share experiences and forge alliances. As Navalny reminded us shortly before his return to Russia, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. So let us therefore take action with renewed determination. Thank you. Dear members, we now move to the number 3 on the agenda, which is reports on OSCE PA activities, and we will now hear reports on recent OSCE PA activities. And we start by ad hoc committees. I first call on Vice President Daniela de Ridder to report on the work of the ad hoc committee on migration.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the activities of the ad hoc committee on migration. We are planning 2 field visits before the annual session and potentially 1 more afterwards, focusing on migration management across the 3 Mediterranean routes. We intend to complement these activities with online policy exchange. Italy has been experiencing a sharp increase in irregular arrivals across the central Mediterranean route since 2020. In 2023, irregular arrivals were up 50% compared to the previous year and were at their highest since 2015 and 2016. Lampedusa has long been targeted by people smugglers as it is situated 100 kilometers from the Tunisian coast and is receiving around 70% of all migrants arriving in Italy. From 6 to 8 March, a delegation of 10 members of the committee will travel to Lampedusa together with the OSCE PA Special Representative on Combating Organized Crime, Mr. Eugenio Zoffoli, who is also head of the Italian delegation. And I'm very thankful that he helped us to organize this visit to Lampedusa. We are very grateful for this invitation, which will enable us to learn firsthand about the situation on the ground with a focus on measures to combat human trafficking and other forms of organized crime in the context of mixed migration flows. As with previous field visits, the committee is also interested in procedures for unaccompanied minors and other vulnerable migrants. In May, the committee will travel to Turkey, to Adana and other cities to discuss current achievement and remaining challenges in relation to irregular migration along the eastern Mediterranean route between Turkey and Greece. This visit comes a little over a year after the devastating earthquake, and you all remember this earthquake and the terrific situation for population living there, which struck southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, areas which were already hosting displaced people. It also takes place against the background of revived cooperation with Greece. The committee also hopes to visit Morocco later this year, together with the OSCE PA Special Representative on Mediterranean Affairs, Senator Pascal Alizard from France. In recent years, Morocco has launched a comprehensive migration reform drive that has offered legal status to nearly 50,000 migrants from sub-Saharan Africa. EU cooperation with Morocco has also improved, with the latter increasingly acting as a gatekeeper for migration towards the EU. As we mark the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the committee continues to monitor the situation of Ukrainian refugees. There are now nearly 6.5 million Ukrainian refugees globally, 6 million of whom are in Europe. In my written report, I have shared some interesting findings by UNHCR on patterns of population movements from and to Ukraine, as well as recommendations which UNHCR has addressed to host countries, urging them to allow refugees to travel home for short periods without losing temporary protection status, as this will facilitate durable returns once conditions permit. The committee will also try and hold 1 to 2 more online policy discussions before the annual session in Bucharest to complement its field visits. We would like to learn more about the expected impact of the EU Migration and Asylum Pact due to be finalized by April 2024. At our meeting here in Vienna yesterday, the commitment had the opportunity to meet the newly appointed OSCE Special Representative and Coordinator for Combating Trafficking in Human Beings, Dr. Carrie Johnston. The committee looks forward to further cooperate with Dr. Johnston's office. And also the committee wishes to underline the importance of promoting best practices in the area of gender-sensitive migration policies. Our next steps are that we look forward to presenting the report and recommendations of the committee to you when we meet next in Bucharest. Thank you for having the opportunity to make this presentation, Madam President, dear General Secretary Montella, and thank you, dear colleagues, for your attention.
Thank you, Daniela, for your excellent speech. I now give the floor to Lord Dubs for some short comments.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm privileged to serve on the Ad Hoc Committee on Migration, and to me that is one of the most useful things that I'm able to do as a member of the OSCE PA. I'd like to congratulate the chair of the committee, Daniel de Rieder, for the way in which she leads us, and indeed on Farima Dafri and the Secretariat, who are providing us with very able support. I think the issue of asylum seekers affects many of us. and it has distorted the politics of our countries. And therefore, focusing on the needs of asylum seekers and refugees and on a human rights approach to it is crucially important. I do believe that if we're going to have a sensible policy in our countries, that we need to get public opinion on our side. And one of the challenges, I believe, to many of us is that we must argue for public opinion to understand what has happened to the people who are fleeing for safety, the experiences they've been through. So we have a massive agenda, and it is about human rights. Nothing can be more about human rights than the way in which we treat our vulnerable fellow human beings.
Thank you, Lord Dubs. Especially the last sentence, I think, underlined the importance of the whole committee. I now give the floor to the Vice Chair of the Ad Hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism, Kamil Aydin.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, we are currently standing at a crossroads. The ever-evolving landscape of technology simultaneously serves as an ally and a source of threat and complexity in the context of counterterrorism. Unfortunately, terrorist groups skillfully exploit technical advancements, including artificial intelligence, to magnify the impact of their actions. They go beyond traditional methods and use new technologies to plan and carry out attacks, revealing a deep understanding of the digital world. The rapid advancements in generative AI additionally enable the creation of highly convincing synthetic media, including audio and video content. By the way, we will be giving a very practical example of this later today in our 17th meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Counterterrorism. The rise of the deepfakes has become a pressing concern, forcing us to confront the unsettling reality that malicious actors can exploit these tools to manipulate information and mislead the public with the aim of radicalizing individuals and destabilizing our societies. However, the same AI that poses these challenges also provides us with the unprecedented options to enhance our counterterrorism capabilities. Machine learning algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data, aiding the identification of the patterns and potential threats. The use of AI-driven predictive analytics may offer a proactive approach to preventing terrorist activities before they unfold, enabling security forces to stay one step ahead. In this era of technological innovation, where real and fake are increasingly difficult to distinguish, we have a collective responsibility to work towards a responsible use of AI in counterterrorism, while minimizing the risks associated with its potential misuse. Respecting the human rights of all parties involving is imperative. Accordingly, we are dedicating the 17th meeting of the CCT, which will be taking place right after this General Committee meeting, to explore this multidimensional relationship between AI, terrorism, and extremist activities. During the meeting, which will feature renowned experts in the field, including one representative from Big Tech, we shall jointly ponder the role that parliamentarians and our assembly can play in mitigating these new challenges. We are proud to underline that this has become a rather distinctive feature of our parliamentary work, as we are always alert of new developments and ready to promote policy convergence, also on the most complex and pressing counterterrorism issues, such as repatriation of FTFs and the atrocities committed by the Wagner Group. Artificial intelligence and new technologies will be key topics also in our upcoming activities. On 6th and 7th of May, the CCT will conduct an official visit to Turkey. These visits enable us to exchange crucial insights gained in our respective nations and foster alignment on various critical matters outlined in our agenda, including the responsible use of AI. Back to back with the official visit, we will preside over the fifth coordination mechanism of parliamentary assemblies, which we will co-organize with UNOSCE following the re-election of the OSCE as chair during the last meeting in October in Vienna. The coordination meeting will be followed by the third policy dialogue with politicians from across the globe, where we will explore trends and define common approaches to counter violent extremists. These two events will take place in Istanbul on 8th and 9th of May. We will continue to emphasize the role of youth in our counterterrorism work, building our successful cooperation with the OSCE network of young parliamentarians, whose members are invited to join our meeting later today. A major area of concern to our work remains the situation in the Sahel region, which continues to be the global epicenter of terrorism, where affiliates of the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant exploit political instability, governance deficits, and the societal tensions to embed themselves in a local conflict dynamics and expand their areas of operation. Generally, the threat posed by the ISIL remains high, despite leadership attrition and financial setbacks. We remain concerned also about the escalated regional tensions in the Middle East, following the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war in October 2023. All of these developments impact our collective security and require our joint attention and efforts. Before concluding, I wish to commend the dedication of our committee members and acknowledge the exceptional support offered by our International Secretariat in this field. Ultimately, we are strong as our staff is. Remarkably, we managed to remain strong and active also during the COVID-19 pandemic, quickly gaining momentum and growing in both relevance and focus over the years, ultimately becoming a point of reference for all other parliamentary assemblies in the world. This makes us very proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille, for your report and your commitment to this work. I will now share some words on the work of the Parliamentary Support Team for Ukraine. Earlier this month, I led the first visit of our committee to Ukraine. Our delegation, which was also joined by Special Representative of the OSCE Chairpersonship in Ukraine, Ambassador Marcel Peskov, met with Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada, Ruslan Stefanchuk, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Irina Borovets, Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, as well as the Ukrainian delegation to the OSCE. Our delegation also visited Irbin and Kostomel, where we met with local authorities and witnessed the devastating effects of the war firsthand. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Ukrainian delegation for receiving our committee in Kyiv. Our discussions focused on the far-reaching humanitarian impact of the conflict, as well as investigations into reported war crimes and initiatives aimed at repatriating forcibly deported children from Ukraine. Our team, which now encompasses 23 members from 20 OSCE participating states, is scheduled to convene later today. Our meeting will center on the main takeaways of our visit. Specifically, how can parliamentarians most effectively support Ukraine? As members of the OSCE, we must advocate for accountability and justice. We also need to continue raising the forcible deportation of Ukrainian children by the Russian Federation. We need greater international awareness and collective action to condemn and prevent these crimes. In conclusion, I want to underscore my intention to keep Ukraine at the top of our political agenda. I now give the floor to Mikita Poturayev for some additional comments. So, I heard he's not here at the moment, so I will now move forward in our agenda to item
if you want.
Now, since Nikita Poturaev is not available at the moment,
Yeah.
I give the floor to one of the Ukrainian delegation members.
Dear Madam President, dear Secretary General, dear colleagues, first of all, thank you very much for all countries who are supporting Ukraine in this very difficult moment of our joint history. But also, dear Madam President, dear Secretary General, and all MPs who travel to Ukraine and who are supporting this team of support of Ukraine. Thank you for doing that. And I want to appreciate your visit. And I want to tell colleagues, for all of you, it was the first time in the history of the Assembly when the President of the Assembly addressed Ukrainian Parliament. First time. And thank you very much. Pierre, you are now in history. And also, I want to say thank you for your visit to Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, because you know, exactly these places, what happened in these places, showed for us very simple moment, very simple thing. What Russians are doing, what they will do, not only in Ukraine, but what they will do in other countries, because Russia will not stop in Ukraine. And if Putin is telling, no, we are not interested to go to Poland, to Baltic countries, to Europe. Remember what he told in 2014. I'm not going to go to Crimea. I don't want to go to Ukraine. And you know exactly what happened. Thank you very much one more time.
Thank you. And the speaker from the Ukrainian delegation was Artur Gerasimov. We now move forward in our agenda to item number 3.2, election observation missions. Since our last meeting in Yerevan, we observed the general elections in Serbia and the early presidential election in Azerbaijan. I remind you that last month I issued 2 statements, together with the director of ODIHR, to deplore the fact that neither Belarus nor the Russian Federation invited the OSCE to observe their elections, in violation of their OSCE commitments. I also condemn the intention of the Russian Federation to hold illegal elections on the occupied territories of Ukraine. I first call on Farah Karimi to report on Serbia.
Thank you very much, Madam President. First and foremost, I would like to thank you, Madam President, for appointing me as head of the OSCE PA Observer Delegation of the early parliamentary elections in Serbia that took place on 17 December last year. I would also like to thank my colleague Reinhold Lopatka for a great cooperation in leading the mission, and all of the observers who took part in it. Our OSCE PA delegation consisted of 70 observers, including 50 members of parliament from 24 different countries. As many of you here, I believe election observation to be a cornerstone of our Assembly's activities and of parliamentary diplomacy. And I would like to commend you for joining the mission in such high numbers. In addition to showing interest by a high participation, OSCE PA observers deployed throughout the country to assess election day proceedings, including in Belgrade, Novi Sad, Niš, Kragujevac, Bujanovac, and Zajeđar. This mission was a joint effort as we closely worked with our partners from the OSCE ODIHR, the European Parliament, and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Together, we deployed 361 observers on election day throughout Serbia. On the day following the elections, we presented our joint mission's conclusions. We concluded that the early parliamentary elections, though technically well administered, and offering voters a choice of political alternatives were dominated by the decisive involvement of the president, which, together with the ruling party's systemic advantages, created unjust conditions. We noted that the frequency of early elections has further eroded public confidence in the functioning of democratic institutions, and together with the lack of political will, left needed reforms unaddressed. We found that fundamental freedoms were generally respected in the campaign, but it was marred by harsh rhetoric, bias in the media, pressure on public sector employees, and misuse of public resources. We also noted that underrepresentation of women in the campaign demonstrates a need for greater commitment to ensure adequate involvement in political life. Positively, we assessed that the work of Republic Electoral Commission benefited from improved transparency. However, our mission highlighted that the oversight bodies for campaign and electronic media remained largely ineffective in deterring violations during the election period. We underlined that while the media covered all electoral contestants in line with the law, most national broadcasters lacked genuine analytical reporting, detracting from the voters' ability to make an informed choice. Election day was smoothly conducted, but was marked by numerous procedural deficiencies, including inconsistent application of safeguards during voting and counting, frequent instances of overcrowding, breaches in secrecy of the vote, and numerous instances of group voting. From the day following the elections, the opposition coalition, Serbia Against Violence, initiated daily protests in Belgrade, demanding the repetition of both the local and the early parliamentary elections due to alleged irregularities, including pressure on voters, vote buying, and organized busing of voters within Serbia and from abroad. Opposition parties also demand immediate access to the voter register to verify the allegations of organized voter migrations. While most demonstrations were peaceful, violence erupted on 24th December in Belgrade, leading to riot police deploying tear gas against the protesters and making 38 arrests. State officials, including the president, repeatedly accused protesters, opposition parties, and supporting civil society organizations of attempting to destabilize the country. Our full post-election day assessment is available online, as well as ODIHR final report, which includes a number of concrete recommendations that we hope will serve as a working basis to bring the country's election framework further in line with international standards for democratic elections. The OSCE PA stands ready to assist the authorities of Serbia at any time in this process, and I would like to thank them again for their cooperation during the mission. Thank you again, Reinhold, for your great leadership during this mission, and thank you, colleagues, for contributing to our observation exercise with such reliability and dedication. Lastly, a heartfelt thank you to the team of our International Secretariat, led superbly by Stephanie Kolthanov, who organized and supported the mission in an outstanding manner. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Farah. I now give the floor to Sandra Bocic to offer some comments.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I listened to your report with due attention. First of all, let me highlight that the Serbian government highly values the expertise and the guidelines of the OSCE and ODIHR also. I must underline that the cooperation between the Republic of Serbia and OSCE was always based on a strong commitment to democratic values, transparency, and the rule of law. Serbia will stay committed to further enhance the electoral environment and continue collaborative efforts with with the OSCE and ODIHR through the re-establishment of a government-led working group. We will analyze all OSCE recommendations as we do from the 2019, but let me remind you on some crucial facts. The recent elections in Serbia have been the most rigorously monitored in the nation's history. A total of 5,587 observers, including both domestic and foreign organizations, monitored the elections. Out of the total 148,987 electoral board members, the ruling party alone had the right to propose approximately 11%, while the opposition parties had the right to propose remaining 89%. Electoral transparency has been enhanced through key e-government initiatives, such as the creation of the unified voter list, integrated with the civil registry, and etc. I remind you, it was the opposition who had demanded snap elections, and yet it was them who explicitly communicated to some of the international electoral observers prior to voting day that they wouldn't recognize the outcome. This orchestrated misinformation campaign serves to systematically undermine the confidence of the public in the integrity of Serbian electoral system, its democratic institutions, and its adherence to the rule of law. Such deceptive narratives crafted with precision pose a serious threat to the democratic ethos and principles that Serbia steadfastly upholds. This is not an isolated occurrence or misinformation in the context of Serbian election. This pattern is evidenced by strictly similar misinformation disseminated during the 2022 presidential and early parliamentary election, as well as 2020 parliamentary election. These repetitive instances of misinformation campaign are indicative of a calculated and recurring strategy aimed at manipulating public perception and disrupting the electoral process. Significantly, this campaign appeared to be dictated by the same information dissemination outlets, reinforcing the notion of a targeted approach in these narrative distributions. The spread of these claims poses a significant risk to the integrity of our democratic processes and the confidence our citizens have in them. In the response, the government of Serbia will continue to be resolutely committed to upholding and safeguarding the principles of transparency and integrity within the electoral process by consistently and proactively disseminating factual information and communicating transparently, showing our dedication to open dialogue and providing clear explanations. This commitment is integral to ensuring the continued strength and resilience of Serbian democracy, particularly in the face of concerted efforts to destabilize our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Bodzik, for your comments. And I now call on Vice Chair Artur Gerasimov to report on elections in Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, dear Secretary General, dear colleagues, it was an honor for me to serve as special coordinator of the International Election Observation Mission of the early presidential election in Azerbaijan. It was not an easy mission, all of you know. And I would like to thank, first of all, my dear colleague Daniela de Ridder, because she did a great job, and it was really great cooperation in leading the OSCE PA Observer delegation. Also, I want to thank you, all the observers who took time off of their busy agendas to take part in the mission. Our OSCE PA delegation consisted of 79 observers, including 61 members of the parliament from 26 different countries. Our observers were deployed throughout the country to assess election day proceedings, including in Baku, Sumgait, Shamahi, Sabirabad, Cuba, Kyrgyzstan, Salyan, and Nakhichevan. This mission was a joint effort as we closely worked with our partners from the OSCE ODIHR, and together we deployed a total of 335 observers on election day. Also, I want to say thank you for Owen Murphy, who was the leader of ODIHR team that place. Also, I want to thank you to Matteo Mikachi, who personally came to Baku and also participated in our meetings. On the day following the elections, I presented our joint mission's conclusions. We conducted that the early presidential election took place in a restrictive environment, and while preparations were efficiently managed, it was marked by the stifling of critical voices and the absence of political alternatives. Importantly, this was the first election to be held throughout the entire internationally recognized territory of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Let me underline, first elections on the entire internationally recognized territory of Azerbaijan. We found that this topic dominated the campaign and echoed the public sentiment. I also want to report that me, as special coordinator, I visited the occupied territories and saw how preparations were done for these elections. Also, we found that long-standing severe limitations on fundamental freedoms of association, expression, and peaceful assembly, both in law and in practice, run contrary to standards for genuine democratic elections. We also noted that the election administration conducted an extensive get-out-the-vote campaign, but the nominal campaign coverage by the media and near absence of analytical reporting limited voters' opportunity to make an informed choice. Finally, we concluded that while election commissions were well-resourced, important safeguards were often disregarded and substantial procedural errors and omissions were observed during the opening, voting, counting, and tabulation. That is the overall picture. Our full statement is available, and unless there are any questions, I will not go into further details. ODIHR's final report on the election will be published in the coming months, and as usual will include a set of recommendations, including priority ones, that we hope will be used as a tool to bring the country's electoral framework more in line with international standards for democratic elections. As colleagues and friends, the OSCE PA stands ready to support the authorities of Azerbaijan in this process, and I would like to thank them once again for their cooperation during this mission. We had very fruitful meeting with the chair of the CEC in Azerbaijan, and it was really very important for us to be well prepared for our observation mission. And one more time, thank you, Daniela, because it was not an easy mission, and it was a real teamwork. I'm really grateful. And also, my greatest thank you for Secretariat, for Stefania Kolchanova, for Team Knobla, all the others who were supporting this mission, because, again, it was not easy, but we done this job properly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Artur. It's great to hear that you had good teamwork, which is important in these missions. I now give the floor to Azai Guliev to offer comments.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to shortly point out three important conclusions made by all international organizations observed the presidential election in Azerbaijan. First, as Artur Gerasimov rightly mentioned, that for the first time since Azerbaijan restored its independence, the election took place across the entire territory of the country in line with the constitutional and legal framework of Azerbaijan, including 26 polling stations in recently liberated territories. Thousands of former IDPs who for more than 30 years had been deprived of exercising their voting rights in their place of origin were finally able to participate in election in completely new environment. By the way, I thank Mr. Artur Gerasimov for the visit before the election day to recently liberated Khankendi and Shusha cities of Karabakh Economic Region of Azerbaijan in the capacity of special coordinator and the leader of the OSCE short-term observation mission to get acquainted with the election process on the ground. Second, the election was conducted in an orderly and professional manner with millions of Azerbaijani citizens exercising their constitutional right to vote in a fair and transparent election. Almost 77% of voter turnout was registered, demonstrating public confidence in the election process. The high voter turnout also indicates public engagement in the electoral processes. Third, President Aliyev, as a victorious commander-in-chief, enjoyed overwhelming support from the people of Azerbaijan, receiving an absolute majority vote cast. This landslide victory is also a reflection of strong approval and renewed mandate bestowed upon him by the people of Azerbaijan to continue the successful implementation of social, political, economic policies, as well as a peace agenda. In conclusion, I would like to thank again Mr. Artur Gerasimov, Madame Daniela Dorider, and those delegations of the participating states that observed the election in Azerbaijan. I am looking forward to welcoming all OSCE delegations to Azerbaijan at the UN International Climate Conference, COP29, to be held from 11 to 24 November 2024 in Baku. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Azai, for your comments. Before we close this item regarding election observations, I give the floor to Andrei Savinik.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. Уважаемые участники Ассамблеи, Беларусь приняла решение не приглашать международных наблюдателей по линии БДИПЧ ОБСЕ и Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ для наблюдения за выборами в Беларуси. Это решение было хорошо обдумано и обосновано следующими обстоятельствами. Все наши инициативы о выработке прозрачных, понятных и объективных критериев наблюдения и оценки выборов были заблокированы и отвергнуты. Все требования об устранении географических и функциональных перекосов в наблюдении за выборами к западу и к востоку от Вены были полностью проигнорированы и не устранены. Польша внесла всех белорусских парламентариев в шенгенские ограничительные списки, что означает фактический запрет на участие представителей Беларуси в наблюдении за выборами в странах ЕС. И у нас к этому уже есть первый прецедент отказа от въезда в Польшу белорусскому депутату, включенному в состав миссии Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ в октябре 2023 года. Политические тенденции на Западе заставляют нас усомниться в сохранении демократических стандартов в странах коллективного Запада. Скорее мы можем говорить о построении системы дефектной демократии или шоукратии и превращения стран Запада в страны постдемократии. Все эти тенденции заставляют нас усомниться не только в объективности наблюдателей по линии БДИПЧ ОБСЕ и ПА ОБСЕ, но и в их способности честно оценивать уровень и содержание реального народовластия в любой стране. Мы готовы будем пересмотреть это решение в случае отказа стран коллективного Запада от обозначенных мной тенденций. При этом Беларусь остается открытой для объективного международного наблюдения по линии государств-участников ОБСЕ. Более 90% приглашенных международных наблюдателей, которые прямо сейчас, сегодня, работают в Беларуси по наблюдению за выборами, приехали к нам из государств-участников ОБСЕ. И это не только представители стран СНГ, но и граждане Болгарии, Германии, Италии, Литвы, Польши, Франции, Швеции, Швейцарии. Всех их отличает только одно. Имея высокую профессиональную подготовку в организации выборов, они используют свою роль наблюдателей для улучшения избирательного процесса в Беларуси, а не как средство политического давления и шельмования. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Thank you, Mr. Savinuk. We need to move now to our open debate on item number 4. And the topic of our debate today is European security today and tomorrow, parliamentary perspectives on the future of the OSCE. And I will now open our debate. The time limit is 2 minutes. And the first speaker on the list is Mr. Mikita Poturayev from Ukraine, and he will be followed by Mrs. Farah Karimi from the Netherlands.
Thank you very much, Madam President, esteemed colleagues. Back in 2014, when Russia, with the attempted annexation of Crimea, attacked Europe order, the OSCE was among the first international institutions to clearly condemn Russia's aggression and to stand in support of Ukraine's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity. Since then, the position of the OSCE has been clear and has been reiterated on numerous occasions. Such a position is about responsibility and leadership. And this support is not only about Ukraine, but also about the values we believe in, about the principles we stand on, and about the future we want to live in. Dear colleagues, the aggressor can be stopped only with our resilience, strength and unity. The OSCE's meaningful response to this war should remain central to the Assembly's actions. In this regard, we believe that the OSCE and its Parliamentary Assembly have all relevant tools to contribute to the implementation of the goals of the Ukrainian peace formula initiated by President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky. It's our common duty to ensure that Russia and its war criminals are held accountable for all the crimes against Ukraine and its people. A special international tribunal must be established to prosecute the crime of aggression against Ukraine. We also call on the OSCE to facilitate the tracing and return all forcibly deported Ukrainian citizens, especially and first of all children, in flagrant breach of international law. Moreover, thousands of Ukrainian civilian hostages and political prisoners illegally detained in Russia, and they must be immediately released and their rights and freedoms duly protected. The OSCE's continued support for the International Crimea Platform remains of great importance for the restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders and of the rules-based international order. Let us not forget that we need to keep unity, firmness and persistence in responding to Russia's aggression and ensuring that fundamental principles of international order are not compromised. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mrs. Farah Karimi from the Netherlands, followed by Mr. Robin Wagener from Germany.
Madam President, dear colleagues, as Putin's war on Ukraine marks its third year, the Ukrainian people's unbroken spirit amidst atrocities is commendable. Our steadfast support for Ukraine's battle against aggression is more critical than ever. We also observe the dire situation for dissenters in Russia, exemplified by Alexei Navalny's assassination. The rise of extreme right parties in Europe, some aligned with Putin, challenges our unwavering support for Ukraine democracy and rule of law. Yet we face an undeniable reality. Western support for Netanyahu's government undermines our credibility, weakening global solidarity with Ukraine. In just over 4 months in Gaza, there have been more children, more journalists, more medical personnel, and more UN staff killed than anywhere in the world during a conflict. We talked this morning about European security, and today and tomorrow. There can't be a true security without peace and justice. If we treat international law as a pick-and-choose option based on political expediency, we are not just losing credibility, we are compromising our own security. We condemn strongly the brutal and violent terror attacks of Hamas. Never again means never again for everyone, everywhere. We can't remain silent when a plausible genocide is taking place in front of our eyes in Gaza and believe we can stay secure. The Ukrainian and Palestinian peoples, both fighting for justice, dignity, and self-determination, merit our full support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Robin Wagener from Germany, followed by Mr. Nicholas Samkaradze from Georgia.
Seit 10 Jahren führt Russland seinen imperialen Angriffskrieg und Aggressionskrieg gegen die Ukraine. Seit 10 Jahren verteidigt sich das tapfere ukrainische Volk. Und ich war gerade selber in der Ukraine, habe einerseits gesehen die Erschöpfung, aber andererseits auch die volle Entschlossenheit der Menschen in der Ukraine, nicht unter einer putinschen Diktatur leben zu wollen und nicht den Horror von Butscha in besetzten Orten überall in der Ukraine haben zu wollen. Und darum ist für uns vollkommen klar, dass wir weiter fest an der Seite der Ukraine in der Verteidigung gegen diese imperiale Aggression stehen. Wir haben gerade den Bericht der Präsidentin gehört, ebenfalls mit dem Bericht zur eigenen Reise und die Suche danach, was Parlamente tun können in der Unterstützung der Ukraine. Ich darf berichten, dass der Deutsche Bundestag gestern einen sehr starken Beschluss gefasst hat. Und auch wenn es aus innerparlamentarischen Debattengründen nicht deutlich wird, vielleicht an den Abstimmergebnissen, sieht man doch, dass in der Mitte des Deutschen Bundestags eine starke Unterstützung für die Ukraine weiterhin besteht. Wir haben gestern beschlossen, die Regierung aufzufordern, weitreichende Waffen zu liefern, um auch hinter der Frontlinie die Mordlogistik angreifen zu können, die Munitionsproduktion zu erhöhen und Munition da einzukaufen, wo sie vorhanden ist, damit die Ukraine kämpfen kann. Und gleichzeitig aber auch russische eingefrorene Vermögenswerte nutzbar zu machen, damit nicht alle anderen für den Schaden zahlen müssen, den Russland anrichtet, sondern die Verbrecher selber, die ebenfalls auch vor Gericht gestellt werden müssen. Auch in einer solchen Zeit bleibt die OSZE eine wichtige Dialogplattform und wir müssen hier keine vollständige ideologische Übereinstimmung haben. Diese Plattform ist gegründet worden im letzten Kalten Kriegssystem grenzenübergreifend. Was wir aber brauchen, ist einen gemeinsamen Respekt vor den Werten, der mit der KSZE damals auf den Weg gebracht wurde. Der Respekt davor, dass Grenzen in Europa nicht mit Gewalt verschoben werden dürfen und im Übrigen auch der Respekt davor, dass die Wahlbeobachtung ein wesentliches Instrument der Arbeit dieser Organisation ist. Und ich kann nicht so richtig verstehen, wie man Mitglied dieser Organisation sein kann und sich dann gleichzeitig dagegen verwehren, eine Wahlbeobachtung durchzuführen, außer man hat eingesehen, dass es selber tatsächlich eigentlich nur Propagandaveranstaltungen sind, keine wirklichen Wahlen. Das ist das Einzige, wie es für mich Sinn machen würde. Was mir diese Zeit, in der wir leben, deutlich zeigt, ist, wie wichtig es ist, dass die Staaten, die für ein regelbasiertes, friedliches Zusammenleben stehen, tatsächlich auch zusammenstehen und gemeinsam dafür arbeiten. Denn die Feinde des regelbasierten, friedlichen Zusammenlebens tun es. Und die Berichte haben gezeigt, die wir aus den Arbeitsgruppen gehört haben, dass gerade in einer Zeit mit den Veränderungen aus Migration und Globalisierung, Krieg und Terrorismus, technischem Fortschritt und Digitalisierung und natürlich der Klimakrise die Notwendigkeit des parlamentarischen Austauschs dringend erforderlich ist. Und einen Satz möchte ich gerade anschieben. Ich bin fest davon überzeugt, dass es notwendig ist, dass wir auch weiter an der Seite Israels in der Verteidigung gegen den Hamas-Terrorismus stehen, wenngleich es vollkommen klar ist, dass auch hervorgehoben werden muss, dass jede Verteidigung in Einklang mit dem Völkerrecht passieren muss und Rücksicht auf die betroffenen Menschen nehmen muss. Aber die Verantwortung für alle Toten trägt Hamas.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mr. Nicholas Samkarachi from Georgia, followed by Mr. Azay Guliev from Azerbaijan.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, 2 years have passed since Ukrainians endure an unprovoked war of aggression by Russia, marked by numerous criminal acts. Georgia has steadfastly supported Ukraine politically, diplomatically, and in humanitarian efforts. Russia's aggression not only jeopardizes Ukraine's security, but also threatens Europe's stability, echoing Georgia's own experience of unilateral alteration of borders through force at the hands of the same aggressor. Along with its ongoing aggression and military actions in Ukraine, Russia has intensified the steps towards the annexation of occupied regions of Georgia. Recent efforts, especially the increased endeavor to completely isolate the occupied Abkhazia, aim to further entrench Moscow's grip on the territory, exacerbating the already dire situation on the ground. This is accompanied by the grim reality of killings and violence, which have become the harsh face of Russian occupation in Georgia. Let me remind you of the recent killings of Georgian citizens Tamas Ginturi and Temur Karbaya in the occupied Tkhinvali region and Abkhazia. These incidents serve as stark reminders of the brutality inflicted upon our people by Russian forces. They underscore the urgent need for international condemnation and action against Russia's violations of human rights and the sovereignty of its neighbors. Russia seeks to erode the statehood and freedom of Ukraine, Georgia, and other countries in its desired sphere of influence. Consequently, we strongly encourage you to intensify your endeavors in thwarting Russia's unlawful activities, which include military actions, annexations, destabilization efforts, and human rights violations across various regions. I would also like to discuss Georgia's regional role and aspirations in the South Caucasus. Despite the inherent complexity and challenges of the region, we remain committed to fostering reconciliation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Georgia unequivocally supports efforts for regional normalization and diligently pursues peace in the South Caucasus. Acting as an honest broker, Georgia is trusted and respected in both Yerevan and Baku. Despite facing numerous challenges, Georgia has shown unwavering determination in pursuing its European integration path. Attaining EU candidate status last year was a monumental recognition of our efforts and our European partner support. This milestone makes our aspiration to join the EU by 2030 increasingly realistic. Finally, I would like to once again take this opportunity to reiterate my call to the OSCE to leverage its crucial role in maintaining stability and security across Europe. It is imperative that this platform articulates a clear strategy for effectively and realistically addressing the ongoing challenges and threats to peace and stability in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Mr. Azay Guliev from Azerbaijan, followed by Mr. Ram Ben Barak from Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. As an OSCE participating state, Azerbaijan is firmly committed to the organization's principles and values, a nation that has long suffered from blatant violations of the fundamental principles of international law and strives for peace and stability in the Caucasus region and beyond. Madam President, your visit to Baku last November provided a good opportunity to discuss and receive first-hand updates on the developments in our region following Azerbaijan's restoration of its full sovereignty over its entire internationally recognized territory. We acknowledge the potential of the OSCE as an effective platform to contribute to trust and confidence-building efforts between Armenia and Azerbaijan, as there is a historic opportunity to turn the page of confrontation and establish good neighborly relationships. Last December, Azerbaijan and Armenia reached two mutual compromises regarding COP29 and swapped off convicted military personnel based on bilateral agreement, which must be considered as a remarkable outcome of bilateral negotiations. I do believe that this momentum needs to be maintained. All efforts must be directed at encouraging both countries to engage through bilateral dialogue to ultimately achieve normalization and signing a peace treaty. Unfortunately, along with such positive examples, we have been witnessing at the Parliamentary Assembly continuous smear campaign against my country. The blames, in particular by French parliamentarians here, that Azerbaijan allegedly has claims or plans with regard to the territory of Armenia, which are absolutely groundless and are simply designed as a pretext to support militarization efforts of this country. It is not coincidental that the French government has just 2 days ago confirmed its militarization policy and pledged new arms deals with Armenia. Such policy of France will only damage already fragile peace and security in the region and seriously undermine the normalization process and therefore must be stopped. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mr. Ram Ben Barak from Israel and followed by Mr. Maria Karapetyan from Armenia.
Thank you for good morning, and thank you for your invitation to me to this event. First, allow me to choose not to engage with the lie and the propaganda presented by some of the delegation. It is very important that all the countries and all the parliament will stand together confronting terror and taking care for the security of their citizens and give them the possibility to live in peace and safely. The radical Islamic terror is attacking us almost everywhere in the world. In most of the cases, we see that who is standing behind the attack is the Shia Republic of Iran. For them, to fight the Western and free world, even the cooperation between the Shia and the Sunni is possible. From our experience in Israel, if you want to be effective in fighting terror, you must fight them where they are located. This is the best defense. Terror has no border, and the cooperation between states is the formula for success. Israel is fighting Hamas and the Islamic Jihad after the terrible terror attack in October 7, 2023. They murdered 1,200 people, women, children, men, and old people murdered, rape, and kidnap people from their bed. I want to be clear. Israel is fighting your fight. When Israel fights in Gaza, we are fighting for Europe and other countries. There is no compromise with terror organization. The terror attack and murder in the name of the extreme jihad is a part of a bigger plan that wants to expose the radical Islam all over. It is not the mainstream in the Islam. Most of them want to live in peace, but this is the extreme fanatic Islam that threatens the modern Islamic State and the free world. It is a common interest of the Arab world and the free world to fight the fanatic movement that use terror to expose their radical idea. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mrs. Maria Karapetian from Armenia, followed by Mr. Malik Benashur from Belgium.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. Armenia wants to sign a peace treaty with Azerbaijan based on unambiguous mutual recognition of each other's territorial integrity within the internationally recognized borders of our countries. We keep repeating this, but Azerbaijan keeps objecting. Something strange happened in the political committee yesterday. For more than 3 years, Azerbaijan was harassing the Parliamentary Assembly for using the words Nagorno-Karabakh. Yet yesterday, the MP from Azerbaijan started talking about Nagorno-Karabakh himself first and alone. This is a sign that Azerbaijan simply wants to continue the conflict, but we do not. This peace treaty that we hope to sign very soon duplicates the international principle that countries cannot refer to their own internal legal acts to put forward territorial claims towards each other, now or in the future. So citing our constitution or historical documents as obstacles for signing the peace treaty is simply an excuse. I just really hope that MPs from Azerbaijan take home a lesson learned here, that this new narrative that Azerbaijan is fighting Armenian revanchism or neo-colonialism or Islamophobia does not stick with the international community. Let's sign this peace treaty and move forward. And one last point regarding the deblocking of communications. Just like we will have to trust you to provide our security of unimpeded transit through your land, you will have to trust us to provide your security of unimpeded transit through our land. Armenia and Azerbaijan can be the best security providers for each other. We are proposing to sign a peace treaty with which Armenia and Azerbaijan recognize each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty over their territories without disclaimers, without special arrangements, for now and forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Malik Benashur from Belgium, followed by Mr. Michal Kobosko from Poland. I will first give the floor to Mr. Michal Kobosko from Poland so that Malik Benashur will find a working device.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. Tomorrow, on Saturday, we will be commemorating, also in Poland, the victims of the brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine. Those who were killed, wounded, tortured, raped, children who were kidnapped, stolen from their families, millions which had to flee their ruined homes and their homeland. After the World War II, after Helsinki, after the end of the Cold War, we could not imagine that such dark days, such atrocities would come to Europe again. But this is our reality of today. Russia decided to suspend their presence and the participation in the OSCE PA proceedings. Obviously, the 6% of the Assembly budget matters to all of us. But we should not complain, nor we should be surprised. This organization is about the cooperation and security. When we say cooperation, Putin responds with isolation, annexation, and domination. We say security, Putin is answering with war, killing the innocent people, mining of Ukraine's territory. Two completely different and separate worlds. We have to face it. Poland will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Ukrainians are fighting today for their own future, freedom and security, but this is a fight for our joint European freedom and security. We must secure further aid to Ukraine, including massive deliveries of weapons and ammunition, and we must do it now before it's too late. Either we do it today, we do it now, or in a very near future, we will have to face the clear and direct danger for all of us on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. And now another try for Mr. Malik Ben Achour from the podium from Belgium, and followed by Mark Vesey from the United States.
Thank you, and sorry for being here. Technical problem on my bench. Chers collègues, nous traversons une époque dangereuse, marquée par le retour de la guerre. Cet état de guerre nous met face à un choix. Soit un monde dominé par la force, soit un monde fondé sur la primauté du droit, l'état de droit, l'idée que les principes valent pour tous, partout et tout le temps. Si nous voulons être crédibles, lorsque nous défendons la centralité du droit international, lorsque nous condamnons fermement la guerre d'agression russe contre l'Ukraine, nous devons être capables de défendre la primauté du droit partout. Le 26 janvier, la Cour internationale de justice a rendu un arrêt que nous ne pouvons pas ignorer. La plus haute juridiction des Nations Unies a établi un risque plausible de génocide à Gaza et a imposé des mesures à Israël visant notamment la protection des civils, l'entrée de l'aide humanitaire, la fin des discours haineux de leaders israéliens prônant la déportation de civils, l'usage de la famine comme arme de guerre ou simplement la déshumanisation des Palestiniens. Et je précise que certains de ces leaders se définissent eux-mêmes comme suprémacistes, fascistes et homophobes. Je rappelle que le ratio de morts quotidiens à Gaza est le plus élevé de tous les conflits modernes. 16 morts pour le Yémen, 24 en Afghanistan, 44 en Ukraine, 96 en Syrie, 250 à Gaza. Et ces chiffres ne créent pas une hiérarchie dans l'horreur. Une victime est toujours une victime de trop. En ce moment même, cette même Cour internationale de justice examine les conséquences juridiques des politiques israéliennes d'occupation et de colonisation des territoires palestiniens. Auditionnée mardi dernier, la Belgique, mon pays, a rappelé le caractère parfaitement illégal de ces politiques et l'obligation faite aux pays tiers de ne pas contribuer politiquement ou économiquement à la perpétuation de cette situation. Dès lors, mon Parlement travaille en ce moment même à l'interdiction issue des colonies. Chers collègues, je vous le dis avec gravité, prenons la mesure du poison mortel qu'est le double standard pour l'ordre du monde et pour la paix. Je ne veux pas d'un monde fondé sur le clash des civilisations. Et je veux vous rappeler un principe absolu. Quelle que soit leur origine, leur ethnie, leur religion ou leur nationalité, on ne touche pas aux civils. Et donc, chers collègues, battons-nous. Battons-nous pour la souveraineté de l'Ukraine. Battons-nous pour la libération des otages israéliens. Battons-nous pour un cessez-le-feu immédiat à Gaza. Tout ça va ensemble. L'ordre du monde est en jeu. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mr. Mark Visi from the United States, followed by Mr. Eugenio Ciofili from Italy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are grateful to Malta's Foreign Minister Ian Borg and the Republic of Malta for agreeing at the 2022 Ministerial Council to chair the OSCE even without the customary 2-year preparation period. It should come as no surprise that we hold Russia solely responsible for this unacceptable delay in selecting the OSCE's leadership. Every effort must be made to avoid such delays in the future. Malta's early and full-throated support for Helsinki principles and willingness to hold Putin to account for crimes in and around Ukraine are both necessary and welcome. Putin must neither be allowed to hamstring this organization nor prevail in Ukraine. We are deeply concerned by Russia's insistence at the 2023 Ministerial Council on limiting the terms in office for the OSCE's top leadership to a mere 9 months. We support Malta's pledge to fill these posts promptly upon their expiration in September. We remain concerned that OSCE's financial resources are shrinking at a time when security threats across the region are larger and more complex than any time in recent memory. And we call upon Russia to pay the substantial back dues it owes OSCE, return stolen OSCE property, and free the OSCE staff detained in Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine. We urge all states to adequately fund and staff OSCE. Despite Russia's malign influence, the OSCE remains an indispensable partner for participating states and civil society striving to strengthen democratic governance and the rule of law. Finally, we welcome Malta's commitment to hold key events in 2024, including the high-level conference on combating anti-Semitism and the Human Dimension Implementation meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And next speaker is Mr. Eugenio Ciofili from Italy, followed by Mr. Daniel Fessler from Switzerland.
Grazie Presidente Kauma, cari colleghi. Non vi è dubbio che il quadro di sicurezza complessiva si sia sensibilmente deteriorato durante lo scorso anno, tanto per effetto dell'accumularsi delle sfide esterne, quanto per i loro riverberi nelle piazze e sulle strade del nostro continente. Della guerra in corso nell'Est Europa abbiamo molto lungamente discusso, ma è necessario ribadire anche oggi quanto l'Ucraina meriti ed abbia bisogno della nostra solidarietà e del nostro aiuto per resistere all'invasione russa e conservare la propria libertà. E l'Italia, il nostro Paese, sta facendo la sua parte. E abbraccio la delegazione dell'Ucraina. Credo che in una prospettiva paneuropea si debba tener conto anche, Presidente, del Mediterraneo. Molti Stati membri dell'OSCE e della nostra Assemblea parlamentare si affacciano infatti sul Mediterraneo e risentono fortemente di quanto vi accade. Un nuovo conflitto, come quello esploso a causa dell'aggressione dei terroristi di Hamas ad Israele, è destinato a ripercuotersi fatalmente anche sugli stati OSCE più lontani. Allo stesso modo nel Mar Rosso gli Houthi attaccano selettivamente mercantili e petroliere, generando incertezza sui mercati e rincari diffusi dei prezzi. Rivendicano queste azioni in segno di solidarietà con Hamas, l'organizzazione terroristica responsabile degli attacchi del 7 ottobre scorso, la più violenta aggressione degli ultimi anni '80, un vero e proprio genocidio verso gli ebrei israeliani ai quali va tutto il nostro sostegno. Ritengo altresì che le crisi mediterranee abbiano la triste capacità di ripercuotersi all'interno delle nostre società, tramite i flussi di migranti che entrano in Europa senza eccessive difficoltà e tra i quali possono nascondersi individui radicalizzati e pronti a darsi al terrorismo. Una situazione questa che è terreno fertile per le criminalità organizzate e le mafie. Un tratto delle nostre preoccupazioni presenti e future dovrebbe essere rappresentato dalla congiunzione delle minacce esterne con i rischi interni. E concludo, tale circostanza chiama in causa il ruolo di mediazione e proposta che compete alla politica, cui è rimesso il compito di smussare le passioni e far emergere compromessi e soluzioni accettabili. La nostra Assemblea parlamentare dell'OSCE è un luogo splendido per confrontare le percezioni ed esplorare le vie d'uscita dalle crisi. Grazie Presidente e buon lavoro a tutti dalla delegazione italiana.
Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mr. Daniel Fessler from Switzerland, followed by Mrs. Meritxell Lopez-Girard from Andorra.
Besten Dank, sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Ich wollte eigentlich nach dem Bericht zur Wahlbeobachtungsmission in Aserbaidschan etwas sagen. Da dies nicht möglich war, komme ich jetzt in dieser Debatte darauf zurück. Ich bitte Sie um Verständnis dafür. Es gab in der Schweiz einen Vorfall, der in der Schweiz zu Diskussionen geführt hat. Einem Parlamentarier aus der Schweiz, der sich offiziell zur Wahlbeobachtungsmission von OSCE ODIHR für die Präsidentschaftswahlen in Aserbaidschan registriert hatte, wurde nach seiner Ankunft am Flughafen von Baku die Einreise verweigert. Und dies, obwohl er von Aserbaidschan die erforderliche Akkreditierung erhalten hatte. Die Einreiseverweigerung hing offenbar mit der Tatsache zusammen, dass er 2 Wochen zuvor in der Parlamentarischen Versammlung des Europarates gegen die Ratifizierung der Vollmachten der aserbaidschanischen Delegation gestimmt hatte. Geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir anerkennen das Recht von Aserbaidschan, im Grundsatz selbst zu entscheiden, wer auf sein Territorium einreisen darf. Wir erachten es aber als nicht korrekt, wenn einem Parlamentsmitglied aus einem anderen OSZE-Staat trotz Akkreditierung wegen seines Abstimmungsverhaltens an einer Wahlbeobachtungsmission verwehrt wird. Im provisorischen Bericht zur Wahlbeobachtungsmission in Aserbaidschan findet dieser Vorfall keine Erwähnung. Wir gehen davon aus, dass dies im definitiven Bericht nachgeholt wird. ODIHR wurde von uns bereits über unsere Erwartung informiert. Besten Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mrs. Meritxell Lopez-Girard from Andorra, followed by Mrs. Irene Charlambides from Cyprus.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, currently we are facing a context in which socioeconomic inequalities are increasing, especially due to a context of inflation throughout the entire region. In this context, we would like to highlight the need to strengthen cooperation between countries to reduce inequalities, to ensure cohesive societies, as well as ensure the safety and well-being of the population. In this sense, we believe that we must act with special attention to the most vulnerable collectives. We would like to use this intervention by expressing Andorra's firm solidarity towards Ukraine. The Principality of Andorra stands with you in this war of aggression, which constitutes a violation of the Charter of the United Nations and the Helsinki Final Act, as well as the international humanitarian law. We want to express the need of accountability and justice in this conflict, in order to preserve human rights and security. Andorra has adhered to the sanctions imposed by the European Union in response to Russia's war of aggression, and we have accommodated Ukrainian refugees. Unfortunately, we are now on the 2nd anniversary of this war, which is a tragedy we cannot afford, as it implies suffering of civil population. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mrs. Irene Charlambides from Cyprus, followed by Mrs. Birgir Thuransson from Iceland. It seems to be that Mrs. Charlambides is not here yet, so the next speaker will be Mrs. Birgir Thuransson from Iceland.
Madam President, we parliamentarians have hope and dreams for our children, and so do Ukrainians. Russia has stolen the hope and dreams of thousands of Ukrainians, children, boys and girls, and some of them just babies. They have taken them from their families, taken them from their homes, and stolen their identity. From the start of the invasion, the Russian authorities have systematically removed children from Ukraine, aiming to turn them against their homeland. Kidnapping children is a devastating crime. Families are searching for them, desperate to find them and bring them home back before their names are changed and they become untraceable. Russia demands release of hostages in Gaza. At the same time, they are kidnappers themselves, who have been charged by the International Criminal Court for stealing children and charged for war crimes. We demand the release of Ukrainian hostages, the Ukrainian children in Russia. We have a strong voice when we are united, and we are united with Ukraine. The abduction of children of another nation is a form of genocide. International mediation plays a vital role in bringing the children back home, and Ukraine has expressed openness to international mediation. Every child that comes back home brings us hope. I encourage member states to do everything they can to broker communication between Ukraine and Russian officials for the sake of the Ukrainian children. Madam President, as time passes, the situation for every single child becomes increasingly complex. We must never forget the stolen Ukrainian children in Russia, in Belarus, and the occupied territories of Ukraine. We must never give up. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was, of course, Mr. and not Mrs. Birgir Thuransson. The next speaker will be Mr. Ludovic Hai from France, followed by Mr. Matti Raidma from Estonia.
Merci Madame la Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues. Ce mois de février vient nous rappeler un triste anniversaire. Voilà 2 ans que nous subissons l'agression russe en Ukraine. 2 ans d'horreur, 2 ans d'effroi, mais aussi 2 ans de solidarité internationale aux côtés de nos amis ukrainiens. Une solidarité sans précédent de nos pays respectifs en matière de sécurité et de défense notamment. Mais regardons aussi l'avenir. Nous devons continuer à aider l'Ukraine, bien évidemment, mais en modifiant peut-être la méthode. Des industriels de l'armement doivent pouvoir venir s'implanter en Ukraine afin que la production d'armes soit localisée dans le pays, au plus près de leurs besoins. Nous devons penser partenariat, nous devons penser souveraineté, nous devons penser long terme. En septembre 2023 s'est tenu à Kiev le premier forum de l'industrie et de l'armement afin de renforcer durablement les capacités de défense de l'Ukraine dans un conflit parti pour durer. Il nous faut encourager collectivement cette volonté. Bien sûr, cela n'empêche pas de continuer à soutenir l'Ukraine comme nous l'avons fait depuis le début de l'agression, en livrant des armements notamment. Une 50aine de pays alliés se sont réunis au sein d'un groupe de contact pour la défense de l'Ukraine. Au sein de ce groupe, plusieurs sous-groupes de travail, les coalitions, organisent la livraison d'armes aux armements et aux Ukrainiens. Défense aérienne, blindés, forces aériennes, sécurité maritime et artillerie sol-sol, rien ne doit être oublié pour que l'Ukraine puisse définitivement mettre un terme à cette agression barbare. Je me réjouis de l'existence concrète de ces coalitions. Le 18 janvier dernier, la France a lancé et dirige la coalition artillerie pour l'Ukraine. Il y a quelques jours, c'est la coalition en soutien de la défense aérienne de l'Ukraine qui a été lancée. Tout cela permettra une aide plus efficace, autant sur le court terme que sur le moyen et le long terme. Et surtout, cela s'articule avec le renforcement des capacités de Kiev à long terme. Mes chers collègues, j'espère que nous n'aurons pas à connaître ensemble les 3 ans de l'agression russe. C'est ensemble, aux côtés de l'ONU et de l'Union européenne, que nous devons œuvrer pour le respect des droits humains et la promotion de la tolérance, préalable indispensable pour une sécurité exhaustive. En attendant, je veux dire tout mon soutien, ainsi que celui de la France, comme l'a rappelé le président de la République Emmanuel Macron et le ministre des Armées Sébastien Lecornu, à nos amis ukrainiens. Il n'y a pas de bonheur sans liberté, ni de liberté sans vaillance, nous indiquait Périclès en son temps. Restons, chers collègues, unis dans notre soutien à l'Ukraine afin que la paix, la démocratie et la liberté triomphent. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. And next speaker will be Mr. Matti Raidma from Estonia, followed by Mr. Per Pons from Spain.
Sorry, technical reasons. Thank you very much, Chair, dear colleagues. Answering the question about our European security today and tomorrow, we must understand and recognize the fact that Russia has already killed the possibility of common security and cooperation in Europe, or at least cut himself out of it, unfortunately. Despite this, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is still alive and important platform for all of us. It brings together parliamentarians from the more than 50 member states and gives us the opportunity to build mutual trust and our common future. Tomorrow marks 2 years of Russia's large-scale, aggressive, genocidal war in Ukraine. We have been resolute enough to end this tomorrow? Probably not. As parliamentarians, we have adopted various resolutions here in the Assembly. But what are our next steps to be more resolute? 2 issues I would like to underline that can continue to carry out the trust of all our societies in the future of the OSCE area. First, the ability to maintain the position that the Russian regime, which has ignored all international rules, and its representatives have no place at our table. If we start a dialogue with the Putin regime, the OSCE PA as organization fails. Secondly, our ability or inability to reach Russia's real responsibility and trial of war criminals, including the country's leadership. OSCE credibility as an organization today and tomorrow depends on our principled determination to keep the international rule-based order functioning together. In conclusion, I would like to confirm on behalf of the Estonian delegation that we still have a trust in the important role of the OSCE in the protection of our common space and values in OSCE area. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Per Pons from Spain, followed by Mr. Bard Hoksrud from Norway.
Buenos días y gracias, Presidenta, por las reflexiones. Yo quería reaccionar un poco a lo que usted ha dicho y a centrar el debate en lo que usted decía sobre que estamos siendo testados, en primer lugar, sobre el futuro de la organización y sobre la falta de confianza, ¿no? En primer lugar, yo creo que si miramos al futuro, esta organización es más necesaria que nunca porque la degradación de la democracia es imparable. Hoy hemos observado como el delegado de Bielorrusia ya ni siquiera intenta maquillar. Es decir, antes íbamos a observar a Bielorrusia, ahora ya no es necesario. Estos regímenes electorales autoritarios cada vez tienen más fuerza y se sienten más legitimados porque además las pulsiones autoritarias en nuestros propios países cada vez son más fuertes. Por tanto, mi primera reflexión es que para el futuro esta organización necesita trabajar profundamente en la calidad de la democracia y en los procesos de observación electoral. A veces observamos en países en los que no hay una real democracia. Observamos los procedimientos y, por tanto, tenemos que ser más cualitativos. Esa es nuestra gran fuerza y la OSCE tiene esa mirada de futuro que es realmente extremadamente necesaria. Segundo punto, que lo ha dicho muy bien el compañero belga Malik, los valores de esta organización no pueden ser asimétricos. Es decir, los valores que defendemos en un país no pueden obviarse o contarse por la mitad y, por tanto, yo reitero la necesidad de un alto el fuego en Gaza y que el derecho internacional y las 4 convenciones de Ginebra de derecho internacional humanitario más los 2 protocolos sean también respetados por países como Israel. Y nadie duda en condenar a Hamás, nadie. Por cierto, cuando aquí se deja entrever que migración y terrorismo van de la misma mano, sinceramente, deberíamos hacernos una reflexión de cómo criminalizamos a gente que busca una vida mejor por razones económicas y que tiene un derecho que está en los tratados internacionales, que es el derecho de asilo. Por tanto, la gente que se atreve a ligar criminalización y migración, sinceramente le hace un flaco favor a esta organización y a la democracia y a los países que representan. Y por último, respecto a Ucrania. Hace 2 años, muchos de nosotros estábamos aquí hace 2 años y muchos de nosotros fuimos a Kiev. Primera reflexión como representante de España. España, con la presidencia de la Unión Europea, aceleró la accesión de Ucrania. Por tanto, ha habido una respuesta desde la unidad europea. Hoy tenemos una Ucrania más europea que nunca y menos que rusa. Por tanto, es verdad que es una tragedia, por supuesto, la guerra es una tragedia, pero hemos respondido bien. Tenemos que estar orgullosos de la respuesta. No estemos todo el tiempo lamentándonos. Sí, sabemos el diagnóstico. Bueno, ¿y ahora qué hacemos? ¿Qué hacemos? ¿Qué hacemos? Como organización, la respuesta es la de una crisis existencial. ¿Qué se hace en estas situaciones? Mi respuesta es que solo funcionará con más multilateralismo. Por supuesto condenar, por supuesto perseguir los crímenes de guerra, por supuesto dar ayuda militar, pero no servirá funcionar sin diálogo y sin fórmulas de paz. Por tanto, hay que mirar al futuro, por supuesto. Y última cosa, es difícil hacer más con menos. No entiendo cuando se dice hacer más con menos. Eso es la falsa austeridad. Se llama recortes. Y por tanto, en las organizaciones y en los estados, la gente que dice que se hace más con menos, miente. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And next speaker is Mr. Bart Hogsrud from Norway, followed by Mr. John Whittingdale from United Kingdom.
Madam President, thank you for giving me the floor. I know that there have lately been fears that Ukraine's heroic struggle for freedom will drop down the agenda of Western countries. Let me therefore assure you that we are with you for the long term. Ukraine must win this war, nothing less. We cannot let an aggressor gain anything from a completely unprovoked, unjustified and brutal attack on a peaceful democratic country. The war in Ukraine is also about all of Europe, about the democratic future of our whole continent. It's a war between freedom and tyranny, between freedom and dictatorship, about freedom and justice. Implementation of the sanction against Russia is also a key. My delegation, along with the delegation of the US and Ukraine, hosted a side event on sanctions evasion yesterday. There are all major issues which we as MPs can raise, discuss in the Assembly and urge to our governments to move forward. My second point is on Belarus. The situation continues to worsen. Most recent developments have seen many family members of political prisoners targeted. It's shameful that the Belarusian authorities have decided not to invite observers for the next parliamentary election. This decision goes against the interest of the Belarusian people. In my parliament, we set up a supporter group for democratic Belarus last spring. I would like to call on inspire colleagues to do the same. We continue to demand immediate and unconditional release for all political prisoners of Belarus. Finally, I was deeply saddened by the death in prison by Alexander Navalny. I would like to send a special message of deepest condolences to Mr. Navalny's family and close friends, and all the millions of Russians who supported him in his fight for a fair and more democratic Russia. In the wake of Navalny's sudden death, we have reason to be even more concerned about Vladimir Kara-Murza and other political prisoners in Russia. We must continue to put this urgent human rights situation on the international agenda and use every means at our disposal to get the political prisoners released. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And next speaker is Sir John Whittingdale from United Kingdom, followed by Theodoros Karaoglu from Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. All of us who were here in Vienna 2 years ago will remember hearing the news of Russia's brutal attack on Ukraine and the inspirational speech from our colleague Mikita Potorayev. Of course, Russia's war on Ukraine actually started 10 years ago this week with the annexation of Crimea. And since that time, the Ukrainian people have shown extraordinary courage in resisting the Russian onslaught. They have done so with the support of countries across Europe and the West, and they need for that support to continue. The UK will be giving £2.5 billion in military aid to Ukraine this year, and I appeal to other countries, and particularly our friends in the United States who have given such huge support, that they continue to do so. The war is imposing a terrible cost in lives, in trauma, and this week I hosted a meeting with 2 children from Kherson who described some of the appalling sights that they should never have had to see at such a young age. 2 things need to happen. We need to establish a special tribunal to try Russia for the crime of aggression. And secondly, we need to make sure that Russia pays for the rebuilding of Ukraine. There are $260 billion sitting in Russian assets in Europe. That money is currently frozen. It needs to be confiscated and used to support Ukraine. As was suggested yesterday by Bill Browder, it could be known as the Navalny Act in those countries that adopt it. I also want to briefly touch on a second war, because last week I led a cross-party delegation to Armenia. I met refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh, and even during the time I was there, four soldiers were killed in a cross-border fire. As the Armenian delegation have made clear, Armenia wants peace. But at the same time, they also wish to move out of the Russian orbit. And yesterday, Armenia announced that it was freezing its participation in the Russian Collective Security Treaty Organization. Just like Ukraine, Armenia also deserves our support. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Theodoros Karaoglu from Greece, followed by Mr. Oscar Mina from San Marino.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. Dear participants, the work of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, here in Vienna, coincides with the completion of the 2 years since the unprovoked and unjustified Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was the 24th of February 2022. We were again here in Vienna when Moscow launched a war against an independent and sovereign country. A reprehensible act of violence which created new data in the geopolitical firmament, endangering peace. Such a condition cannot be tolerated in Europe in the 21st century. As reprehensible are the practices that led to the death of Alexei Navalny, who paid with his freedom at first, and then with his life, his bravery. His courage must not be forgotten, and Russia must answer serious questions about the circumstances of his death. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I cannot but refer to Ukraine because since 2022 it experiences what Cyprus experienced in 1974. This year marks 50 years of illegal Turkish invasion, occupation, refugees, division, missing persons, and violation of human rights of Greek Cypriots. Half a century later, Cyprus is the only European country under occupation. Finding a fair, sustainable, functional, and mutually acceptable solution within the framework of the relevant decisions of the United Nations Security Council and the European acquis remains a national priority for Greece. With these thoughts in mind, thank you very much for your attention, and I am confident that the work of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly will be a complete success. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Oscar Mina from San Marino, followed by Mrs. Vilja Aleknaite-Abramikiene from Lithuania.
Grazie Presidente. Premesso che le persistenti difficoltà nei rapporti con gli Stati in conflitto all'interno di questo nostro organismo, in particolare nel conflitto Russia-Ucraina, rimangono la fonte principale del malessere che pervade oggi l'OSCE, ma credo sia necessario che dobbiamo continuare a svolgere il nostro ruolo di pace, utilizzando in particolare le nostre istituzioni come l'Ufficio Democratiche e i diritti dell'uomo, l'ODIHR, l'Alto Commissario per le minoranze nazionali, il rappresentante per la libertà dei mezzi di informazione, nonché le nostre operazioni sul terreno, tutte istituzioni che costituiscono degli strumenti importanti di assistenza agli Stati partecipanti all'interno di questo organismo. Dovremo quindi continuare ad investire sui nostri principali punti di forza, come quello della nostra capacità di collegare la dimensione umana nella prevenzione dei conflitti, le nostre missioni sul terreno quali strumenti cruciali di importanza con il contatto diretto con le autorità locali e le varie società, la nostra presenza consolidata nelle aree spesso ignorate da altri organismi internazionali che hanno un notevole potenziale strategico. Quindi credo che il nostro operato non possa essere sminuito da un conflitto o da una diatriba tra degli Stati che fanno parte di questa regione. Concludo dicendo che è diventato sempre più evidente la necessità di instaurare nel quadro dell'OSCE stesso un nuovo rapporto di dialogo con gli Stati membri, anche con quelli in conflitto, e quindi che si caratterizzi da un lato per un maggior impegno nell'affrontare le nuove sfide alla sicurezza mondiale, in particolar modo contro il terrorismo, e dall'altro da una più efficace cooperazione con gli attori internazionali che tenga in debito conto i rispettivi mandati, competenze ed esperienza per sperimentare nuovi successi anche per noi e sinergie per attività complementari a questo processo di pace. Presidente, mi permetta qualche secondo per comunicare all'Assemblea che dopo la conferma degli accordi intercorsi dal 2022 con lo stesso segretariato, la sessione autunnale del 2025 si svolgerà nella Repubblica di San Marino. Grazie Presidente.
Thank you, and I would like to say that we only have 1 hour at our disposal for the debate, so please pay attention to the 2-minute timeline so that everybody can speak. So the next speaker will be Mrs. Vilja Aleknaite-Abramikiene from Lithuania, followed by Irene Sharalambides from Cyprus.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to express my full support and appreciation for Madam President's report and her determination to make the OSCE's work more effective. The fight of Ukraine is at the very center of our debate. But Putin speaks in open language that his goal is to destroy the Western civilization and establish the Russian order globally. It's very important to remind what or who always has been and still is the ultimate target and enemy of Kremlin. And it is the United States of America. Therefore, all American politicians, no matter what political affiliation, must explain this to their electorate in all states and all constituencies. President Joe Biden has underlined on numerous occasions that military assistance to Ukraine is an investment in American national security. So is in Europe. By providing Ukrainians with weapons, we support the most experienced and devoted army of Europe, defending the core principles of the OSCE and Western civilization. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mrs. Irene Sharalambides from Cyprus, followed by Mr. Slaven Radunovic from Montenegro.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, critical issues that impact peace, stability, the global economy, and human lives are at an inflection point. The war between Israel and Hamas continues to threaten the entire Middle East. The humanitarian situation prevailing in Gaza stresses the need to protect all civilians. At the same time, the hostages must be returned to Israel. It is imperative to prevent further escalation and possible diffusion of the crisis in the region. In this explosive mixture, extremism, terrorism, and the ambitions of certain regimes further destabilize the entire region. Iran persistently seeks dominance and backs terrorist groups, among them the Houthis. Their attacks against commercial shipping in the Red Sea are causing tremendous disruptions to world trade. Their use of drones, missiles, and speedboats in endangering maritime security, while they claim to target vessels with links to Israel, many attacks have affected ships unrelated to the conflict. The international community must address this threat head-on. In addition to action taken by the USA and the UK, the decision on launching an EU operation is welcome, but time is of the essence. Freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and the Gulf must be restored and safeguarded. Dear colleagues, our support to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity is a continuous commitment. However, we cannot but point out that the imposition of martial law by President Zelensky prohibiting to parliamentarians like our dearest colleague Gerasimov and Nikita, who are the best representative of their countries, to leave the country and need to take a special license to get out of that is inappropriate. Democracy is what separates us from the autocratic regimes we are fighting and we must safeguard. Also, Cyprus knows this all too well. 50 years have passed since we have to deal with the Cyprus problem. This is why we now hope that the appointment of a personal representative of the United Nations Secretary General can give new impetus to reviving negotiations for the solution of the Cyprus problem. We very much hope that everyone involved, and my dear friends from Turkey that sit around here, will contribute the best way possible to push these negotiations forward. And also, I have to announce something I think most of you will be familiar. Turkish citizens now will be able to visit Greek islands without a visa, and this is a step in the direction of building ultimate and build peace. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Slaven Radunovic from Montenegro, followed by Mr. Morad Baybatur from Turkey.
Madam Chair, Secretary General, esteemed fellow parliamentarians. It is 21st century, the year 2024. Instead of seriously engaging in climate change and natural disasters awaiting us in the future, developing technology and science, encouraging economic development, and so on, we are in a situation where the key topics are warfare, conflicts, attacks, instability, destruction worldwide. Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, a wider area of the Middle East, etc., etc. The international stage has darkened dramatically over the recent years. The flames of conflict shake the international order foundation. Peacekeeping is in crisis. Diplomacy is in crisis. Let us be sincere. Multilateralism is in crisis. Could we seize the conflicts? Even more importantly, could we prevent them? I come from Montenegro, a territorially very small country, but big with respect to its history, heritage, warfare, and unfortunately with a close time distance from the latest conflicts in the region. Dear colleagues, why are fewer political solutions to conflicts being offered? Let us recall the origins of the OSCE by the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, which during the Cold War served as a prominent multilateral forum for dialogue and negotiations between the East and the West. Dear colleagues, we are parliamentarians of an organization that aims at building and maintaining stability, peace, and democracy for more than 1 billion people. I cannot help but ask, where did we go wrong? Is the OSCE still a multilateral forum for dialogue and negotiation between parties in conflict? I wouldn't say so. We are in need of an OSCE that will be strong and capable of preventing conflicts, engaging in crisis management and post-conflict rehabilitation. We need cooperation and dialogue between participating countries. We must crucially contribute to the immediate cessation of bloody conflicts and to saving thousands of lives that are lost every day. Only peace building is a prerequisite for a better future for humankind that has to and that can start immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Murat Baybaptur from Turkey, followed by Mr. Radovan Kovacevic from Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Sayın Başkan, teşekkür ediyoruz. Yunanistan temsilcisi Sayın Karaoğlu gerçekleri çarpıtıyor. Öncelikle bunu ifade edeyim. Bu iddiaları esefle karşılıyor ve reddediyoruz. Türkiye 1960 Garanti Anlaşması'ndan kaynaklanan yükümlülükleri çerçevesinde Kıbrıs Adası'ndadır. 1974'te junta tarafından yapılan darbenin ardından müdahale edilmiştir. Kıbrıs konusunda muhatap Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti'dir. Kıbrıs Türk tarafı egemen eşitliği ve eşit uluslararası statünün tescilini istiyor. Müktesap hakların tescili sonrası Rum tarafıyla işbirliğine dayalı iyi komşuluk ilişkisi kurmayı talep ediyor. Diğer ifadeyle Kıbrıs meselesinin çözümüne yönelik yeni bir müzakere süreci ancak Kıbrıs Türklerinin özden gelen haklarının tescilinin ardından başlayacaktır. Eğer Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi bu hakların tescilini yapamıyorsa uluslararası toplum ve BM üyesi ülkeler Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti'ni tanıyarak bunu yapabilirler. Bu anlayışla Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti'nin bağımsızlığının tanınması çağrımızı tekrarlıyoruz. Bu çağrıların ve önerilerin tarafsızlıkla değerlendirmesini bekliyoruz. Öte yandan beyanı için Sayın Şarampiles'e yönelik olarak şunları ifade etmek istiyoruz. Bilindiği üzere Kolombiya eski Dışişleri Bakanı Coellar 5 Ocak'ta Birleşmiş Milletler Genel Sekreterinin Kıbrıs kişisel temsilcisi olarak göreve başlamıştır. Bu temsilcinin görevi 6 ay ile sınırlıdır. Yeni resmi çözüm müzakerelerinin başlatılması için taraflar arasında ortak zeminin mevcut olup olmadığını araştırmakta görevlidir. Kişisel temsilcinin objektif bir değerlendirme yapmasını ve raporda sahadaki gerçekleri gerçeğe sadık bir şekilde yansıtmasını bekliyoruz. Güvenlik Konseyi ise gerekli sonuçları çıkarmalı ve çözüme gerçekten yardımcı olabilecek bir yaklaşıma yatırım yapmalıdır diyor. Teşekkür ediyoruz.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Radovan Kovacevic from Bosnia-Herzegovina, followed by Mrs. Daniela de Rieder from Germany.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Republic of Srpska, and I would like to say a few words about elections in Serbia. Due to international law, Dayton Peace Agreement and the special and parallel relations between Republic of Srpska and Republic of Serbia, citizens of Republic of Srpska and Serbs from Bosnia and Herzegovina have a right on Serbian citizenship and of course right to vote on Serbian elections, which was on the last elections unfairly and maliciously questioned and problematized. I would also like to remind you that also Croats from Bosnia and Herzegovina have a right on Croatian citizenship and right to vote on Croatian elections. And they even have their own electoral unit and they elect 3 members of Croatian parliament, country which is an EU member. I would also like to say that observers from Bosnia and Herzegovina claim that elections in Serbia were held in a fair and democratic atmosphere and in line with all the electoral standards. Their reports represent full adherence to the rules and standards and absence of any faults in this regard. Therefore, for our side, there is no reason to doubt that the results do truly represent the wish, intention and political choice of voters in Serbia, no matter who likes it or not. That is democracy, to accept the result that represents the will of the people, even if you, as a leader of a party, do not like it. However, what must be openly said and underlined here is the fact that voters from Bosnia and Herzegovina, majority of them coming from the Republic of Srpska, who have the right to vote, were exposed to all kinds of attacks from the side of opposition parties. Those attacks were both through all kinds of media in the region, but also close to be of physical nature, when voters were even concerned for their well-being because of the undemocratic reaction from the opposition parties in Serbia when they lost the elections. This was a hysterical, outrageous and inexcusable situation which created the atmosphere of lack of trust regarding intentions and background of this very attack coming from the opposition parties in Serbia that showed how immature Serbian opposition parties and their leaders still are. To sum up, elections in Serbia were fair and democratic. The people chose their leaders and it has to be respected. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mrs. Daniela de Rieder from Germany, followed by Mr. Troskot from Croatia.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen! Ich hatte im vergangenen Herbst Gelegenheit, Kiew, Irpin und Butscha zu besuchen. In der Ukraine ist das Grauen Alltag und schon deshalb verdient dieses Land unser aller Solidarität. Dies muss sich aber auch monetär und militärisch ausdrücken. Und damit appelliere ich an uns alle. Besonders gravierend aber würde sich der Rückzug der US-amerikanischen Unterstützer manifestieren. Daher bitte ich insbesondere unsere republikanischen Kolleginnen aus den USA, in ihrer Solidarität auch weiterhin an der Seite der Ukraine zu verbleiben. Putin muss wissen, er und sein Regime werden sich verantworten müssen für ihre Verbrechen und für den imperialistischen Angriffskrieg gegen die Ukraine. Der partielle Rückzug der russischen Delegation aus unseren Reihen ist ein Zeichen von Schwäche und Misserfolg. Ich vermute, Sie wollen der kritischen Diskussion um den Tod von Alexei Nawalny ausweichen und sich nicht anhören müssen, dass wir fordern, dass auch Wladimir Karamursa, Ian Gershkovich und andere politische Gefangene freikommen müssen. Die Welt gerät in der Tat aus den Fugen. Da ist es allerdings ermutigend, dass es dem deutschen Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz und anderen wichtigen Politikerinnen gelungen ist, die Präsidenten der verfeindeten Republiken Armenien und Aserbaidschan zusammenzubringen für einen produktiven Dialog. Die Bevölkerung beider Länder sind durch die kollektiven Erfahrungen von Flucht und Vertreibung aus den kriegerischen Auseinandersetzungen tief traumatisiert. Davon konnten wir uns überzeugen, auch in vielen Gesprächen anlässlich der Wahlbeobachtung, die ich gemeinsam mit meinem Kollegen Artur Gerasimov leiten konnte. Unsere Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus Aserbaidschan und Armenien haben unsere volle Rückendeckung für den raschen Abschluss eines Friedensabkommens auf der Grundlage des internationalen Rechts. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, unsere OSZE-Kooperationspartnerschaften mit dem Maghreb sowie mit Ägypten und Jordanien müssen ausgebaut werden. Sie haben zu Recht den Krieg in Gaza erwähnt. Wenn Frieden und Sicherheit bedroht sind, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, müssen wir umso lauter sein. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. And the next speaker on the list is Mr. Troskot from Croatia, followed by Mr. Luis Grasa from Portugal.
Dear Madam Chair, I'm very glad that I'm actually speaking after honorable parliamentarian in Germany, Mrs. De Ridder, because I would like to congratulate her for the leadership she took up, alongside with Mrs. Karimi as well, because they took very tough fields in terms of elections, together with their assistants as well, where they showed courage, leadership. And I can say for Mrs. De Ridder, because I'm following up the situation in Germany, she's currently taking up the bullets for the entire OCPA platform, because she was very dedicated to go to Azerbaijan to monitor the elections over there. I would like to congratulate to this. I think this is something that we truly are, and these are the values that we should sincerely cherish within our organization. Number two, I was expecting more debates about the elections that we had, because this is our core business. I would like to touch the Azerbaijani elections that we had. I'm not going to do the political assessment or alignments on anything. I'm just going to say something that we said in Baku. Based upon the forms ABC that we had, we were observing the elections in Sumkayet, in some parts of Baku, and if we are assessing the elections based upon the forms, we haven't found any irregularities. We were together with the Italian delegation, and we were closely cooperating with people in Azerbaijan. Number two, in Serbia, we were doing as well, like the northern parts. I'm not doing any political assessments. You already stated the report, and we were not undermining anything. Just for the spots, and for the time being on those spots, we haven't found any irregularities. I wanted to touch Israel as well, but I don't have any time left. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you also for respecting the timeline. The next speaker is Mr. Luis Grasa from Portugal, followed by Mr. Hayato Okamura from Czech Republic.
Madam President, dear fellow deputies, we are again in Vienna 2 years after the beginning of this unjust and unjustifiable war that calls in question not only the foundations of the Helsinki Declaration, but international law itself. A war on the old European continent with a goal of territorial expansion is a gigantic civil and democratic regression. And so, in the face of the horror of death of women, men and children in the name of a medieval desire to conquer land behind the borders, it is normal that sometimes we express our frustration and ask ourselves, have we done everything in our power? I want to greet our colleagues in the Ukraine Parliament, underline our support and also the support of the Portuguese Parliament for the Ukrainian people. Our organization was perhaps the first to condemn Russia from the military invasion. We were gathered here in this place a few hours after the beginning of the war. We condemned Russia clearly and unequivocally from the first moment, and this condemnation was so unanimous that the members of the Russian Parliament preferred to self-suspend their participation. This is an organization that brings together parliaments and deputies. It was not we who expelled the Russian Federation, even if many of us so wished. It was Russia that, without arguments to face our various convictions, closed itself, isolating itself from the world of dialogue, the world of the law and the world of human rights. The military situation is difficult, and it's good to remember that it has been difficult since the beginning of the war. That's why we can't let this war fall into a kind of public silence. The war that Ukraine is waging against Russia is also a war for the democratic spirit on which our parliaments are based. We cannot let the elapsed time tire our public opinion. I want to welcome the initiative of our President, Pia Kauma, to set up a permanent monitoring group of the situation in Ukraine. I was recently with President Pia, with MPV from Norway, MP Michael from Belgium, and our Secretary General, Robert Montelli in Ukraine. The visit to Kyiv allowed us to get a real sense of the situation on the ground, collect information about the war, about the ongoing investigation of war crimes. Those responsible have to ensure will be tried. about Ukraine children taken to the Russian Federation, and about whom their fate is unknown, about the 2 OSCE officials who are illegally detained in Russia. This presence on the ground, these missions are very important, particularly when there are no favorable conditions for dialogue that can lead to peace. It is important that this assembly knows how to adapt and make its presence on the ground a way to draw the attention of the public opinion of our citizens to the situation in Ukraine. More missions on the ground, more participation in investigation into the war crimes that occur in Ukraine and other parts of the world, more pressure on our governments. It seems to be, at this time, the best response that the OSCE and the path of those like us defend freedom over tyranny can take. Let's not lower our arms. Let's not shut up our voice. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Hayato Okamura from Czech Republic, followed by Mr. Ravshanbek Alimov from Uzbekistan.
Dear Madam President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in view of tomorrow's commemoration of the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, we must once again condemn Russia's aggression, which is not only a gross violation of the UN Charter and international law, but also a major threat to security in Europe as well as to the whole world. It is Russia who is trying to destabilize the international order and to create more geopolitical turmoil and instability in various regions of the world. People across the globe are affected by the consequences of Russia's aggression, such as food insecurity, disruption of international trade, nuclear safety, or unstable energy prices. Ukraine's defeat would significantly change the global geopolitical architecture. Therefore, it is important to respect the sanctions against Russia and not to encourage their circumvention. The sanctions are intended to limit Russia's economic capacities, which support its aggressive policy. The Czech Republic supports the Ukrainian peace formula as the only viable way forward towards just and sustainable peace. Any peace solution cannot be found without both the support and participation of Ukraine. For that reason, we underline Ukraine's ownership of the future peace arrangements. The Czech Republic continues to be one of the most active and devoted advocates of the peace formula. In this respect, we have assumed the role, together with France, Sweden, and recently Japan, of the co-chairs of the Working Group number 1 on nuclear and radiation safety. At the end, I want to express my opinion that it is necessary also to strongly support democratic citizens of Belarus and Russia. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Ravshanbek Alimov from Uzbekistan, followed by Mr. Joe Giglio from Malta. All right, we move to the next speaker, Mr. Joe Giglio from Malta, please, followed by Mrs. Christine Normandin from Canada.
Thank you, Pia. As a member of the Maltese delegation, and on behalf of the same delegation, I would primarily wish to express our gratitude towards the support this Assembly has shown for Malta's appointment as OSCE Chair for 2024. This is yet another important moment for our country, which, notwithstanding its small size, has always shown and proved that it can rise to the occasion and take on any challenging task. I trust that this Assembly does understand that Malta has assumed this role at such short notice, but with a sense of commitment and responsibility in this critical moment, and to ensure also the organization's survival. The situation in Ukraine for Malta as OSCE chair remains a top priority. Similarly, much commitment is needed on those issues such as the approval of the budget, which are so important for this organization's continuance and relevance. I believe that this organization should also not lose sight and focus on the situations in Georgia, the borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Moldova, amongst others. Equally important, we believe, is the situation in Gaza, the situation in the Middle East. The conflict in the Middle East ought to be on the agenda of the OSCE. It is imperative to understand and accept that this conflict does bring about major security issues globally and also in the Mediterranean. This conflict implies that the OSCE needs to find ways to enhance and strengthen its Mediterranean dimension. It is only in this way that the organization will continue to be relevant and, in the words of the motto that we have chosen, will be strengthening resilience and enhancing security. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. And the next speaker on the list is Mrs. Christine Normandin from Canada, followed by Mr. Pascal Lecamp from France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Mon intervention porte sur les sanctions économiques contre la Russie. On le sait, les sanctions peuvent prendre du temps pour être efficaces. L'économie de guerre actuelle de la Russie, où les dépenses militaires atteignent 7% du PIB, fait en sorte que le taux de chômage est relativement bas. C'est plutôt sur le long terme que les sanctions feront effet. Le Fonds international monétaire mentionne que si l'économie dopée par les dépenses militaires donne présentement à la Russie une croissance économique, d'autres aspects, comme la réduction des transferts technologiques causés par les sanctions, font qu'à long terme, les perspectives économiques de la Russie sont sombres. Mais il y a une autre raison pour laquelle les sanctions ne sont pas aussi efficaces qu'elles pourraient l'être dans le court terme, c'est qu'elles peuvent être contournées. On le sait, la gestion des postes frontaliers, notamment dans les pays baltes, n'est pas évidente. La liste des produits sanctionnés est complexe. Cette liste diffère entre la Russie et le Bélarus. Plusieurs produits déclarés à destination du Kazakhstan ou du Kirghizistan, par exemple, ne s'y rendent jamais, et j'en passe. Dans le contexte, je suggère que l'AP-OSCE se penche sur les aspects suivants, à savoir l'imposition de sanctions aux pays qui permettent le contournement des sanctions contre la Russie, ainsi qu'une diminution forcée des exportations vers le Kazakhstan, le Kirghizistan et d'autres, d'une part. Et d'autre part, les sanctions peuvent prendre du temps à faire effet, on le sait, mais la Russie est une menace constante, avec des cycles d'agression qui reviennent visiblement aux 6, 8, 10 ans. Nos collègues ukrainiens nous le disaient déjà il y a 10 ans, ils nous le réitèrent encore, la Russie ne s'arrêtera pas. C'est ce que l'histoire qui s'écrit nous confirme malheureusement. Alors, dans le contexte, je suggère que l'AP-OSCE commence déjà à considérer la pertinence du maintien dans le long terme de façon préventive et à des fins dissuasives de sanctions sévères contre la Russie dans un contexte post-Ukraine. Merci.
Thank you. And the next speaker on my list is Mr. Pascal Lecamp from France, followed by Mrs. Monika Tsaikova.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Chers collègues, la réponse à la question de la sécurité européenne aujourd'hui et demain commence par l'Ukraine, comme cela a été rappelé par de nombreux intervenants. Alors que 2 années de guerre en Ukraine se sont déjà déroulées, que 10 ans sont passés depuis l'annexion de la Crimée, le conflit semble s'enliser et les victimes s'accumulent. La solution réside dans une victoire de l'Ukraine et une paix négociée à ses conditions. L'Europe, et notamment la France, l'Allemagne ou encore la Pologne et bien d'autres pays de l'Union européenne, apportent un soutien civil et militaire à l'Ukraine. Les États-Unis sont également un partenaire stratégique de premier plan pour l'Ukraine et nous sommes à l'aube d'une année électorale 2024 déterminante pour l'Europe comme pour les États-Unis. Le résultat des élections européennes du 9 juin montrera certainement un nouveau visage du Parlement européen qui pourrait avoir une approche différente des choses, même si les chefs d'État et de gouvernement seront les garants d'une continuité. Aux États-Unis, certaines déclarations de l'ancien président américain, Donald Trump, candidat aux élections du 5 novembre prochain, questionnent sur les risques de retrait de l'appui financier des États-Unis s'il était élu. Au-delà de l'aide à l'Ukraine, certains discours suscitent également des inquiétudes sur le multilatéralisme dans son ensemble. Je pense notamment aux déclarations sur l'OTAN. Les mois à venir seront donc décisifs pour l'avenir de la sécurité européenne. Il faut donner d'ici là et dès maintenant, en accélérant notre soutien et en particulier notre partenariat des industries de défense sur le sol ukrainien rappelé par mon collègue Ludovic Hay, les moyens à l'Ukraine de mettre un terme à cette agression injustifiée qui n'a que trop duré. Ma question, Madame la Présidente, comment la paix OSCE peut-elle agir et mieux anticiper une situation géopolitique nouvelle, tout à fait crédible en cette fin d'année 2024 au regard des éléments que je viens de citer, dans laquelle, pour la première fois depuis la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, une nouvelle alliance contre nature pourrait menacer budgétairement et militairement l'Ukraine et donc l'Europe dans son intégrité. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. That was almost exactly 2 minutes. So next speaker on my list is Mrs. Monika Tsaikova from North Macedonia, followed by Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine.
Dear Madam Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, today we are talking about European security, but in time of daily cyber attacks, war in Ukraine, crisis in the Middle East, the question is, do we live secure in the world? This is a difficult time for the security of Europe as well as in the world, and our commitments should be fully focused on providing possible solutions to the challenges ahead, aware of the situation on the ground. These crisis engagements have the potential to erupt as unplanned and unforeseen moments and should therefore be prevented. Emphasis must be placed on the benefits of OSCE field missions wherever they are distributed, although this will be difficult due to the current polarization caused by the Russian invasion. The OSCE, as the largest regional security organization, has a distinct added value and can offer resources and mechanisms for easing tensions, strengthening predictability, restoring channels of communication and critical dialogue. Its rich experience and appropriate mechanisms in the domain of the human dimension will also be of great importance and conditions for a peaceful and diplomatic prevention and resolution of the conflicts. Our highlight as OSCE have to be to build greater synergies between the participating states of the organization with full respect of their independence, but with the common goal of improving the impact of OSCE activities. It is important to underline that we must work together to find solutions. Not just to talk, but finding solutions. We have to fight to solve problems because they are worth solving, as it was expressed in our chairpersonship in Macedonia motto, it's about the people. Our duty, our services, our political activities are always about the people. The peace is the driving force of the multilateralism, and it's the most precious ideal of humankind. That's why we must join our force around our joint pursuit for peace. I know that these are very difficult times for peace and security, but security is a basic human need and our duty is to provide it. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I have to limit the speaking time now to 1.5 minutes. So the next one on the list is Mrs. Irina Gerashenko from Ukraine, and followed by Mrs. Tinatin Boguchava from Georgia.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. 10 years ago, Russia attacked Ukraine. If we had taken this threat seriously then, perhaps we could have avoided a major war. But instead, he would has been afraid to upset Putin, thinking he might escalate further. Putin only understands strengths. If he delay giving Ukraine as the weapons it needs, he will continue to advance. If Ukraine doesn't stand strong, Moldova, Poland, or the Baltic states could be next. Europe must strengthen its military capabilities for its own security. security. NATO remains as the only real guarantee for European security. Sanctions against Russia must be strengthened and assessed to help rebuild Ukraine. Putin's announcement of elections in Russia and occupied territories is illegitimate, and he must be punished for his crimes. Elections were also supposed to take place in Ukraine this year, but due to the state of war, this is impossible. Elections must be democratic and including refugees and military personnel. Therefore, elections in Ukraine will take place after the war, and there is full consensus among all political forces on this matter. The International Court of Justice decision of Russia's violations is disappointing, and we need an effective tribunal for fair punishment. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mrs. Tinatin Bogucheva from Georgia, followed by Mr. Guillaume de Vos from Belgium.
Thank you, Madam President. I speak before you today with a sense of profound responsibility, cognizant of our collective duty to uphold and defend our common values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. It is precisely these values that are increasingly under threat in Georgia, where oligarchic rule of Russian-made billionaire Bedzina Ivanishvili has captured state institutions and subjugated the economy to work in the interest of the ruling elite. Mimicking Putin's playbook, Ivanishvili has locked up his main political opponent, President Mikhail Saakashvili, on fabricated, politically motivated charges and has subjected him to inhuman, degrading treatment. Alexei Navalny's murder, whom Putin had compared to President Saakashvili, has indeed shocked the world. But as Navalny himself had warned, evil triumphs when good people do nothing. It is incumbent upon us, therefore, to act, not to turn a blind eye, but to call out and to counter authoritarian tendencies threatening the fabric of our societies and the peace of our region. Tomorrow marks 2 years of Russia's unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As Putin wages a brutal war in Ukraine, Russia's creeping annexation of Georgian territories continues. Putin's declared plan to build an illegal naval base in Georgia's occupied region of Abkhazia on the Black Sea is yet another security threat for Europe. This global bully will not stop unless he is stopped by our joint resolve and unified action. Lastly, I plead before you to galvanize support in this esteemed assembly for an election observation mission in October of this year to Georgia's parliamentary elections, where the fate of our nation and the course of our democratic and Euro-Atlantic future will be decided. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Guillaume de Vos from Belgium, followed by Mr. Thanasis Papathanasis from Greece.
Chers collègues, comme parlementaires, nous avons la responsabilité de dire les choses telles qu'elles sont. Aujourd'hui, Israël est en train de mener à Gaza des crimes de grande ampleur. On parle de crimes de guerre, de crimes contre l'humanité et même de risques de génocide, comme l'a statué la Cour internationale de justice. En cet instant, le gouvernement israélien commet le pire. Plus de 30 000 morts, dont environ un tiers de femmes et d'enfants. Un enfant tué tous les quarts d'heure, ça fait 10 depuis le début de notre réunion. Des dizaines de milliers de blessés, 85% de la population déplacée de force et 1,4 million de Gazaouis bombardés à Rafah sans possibilité pour eux de fuir, pris au piège sur un territoire pratiquement rayé de la carte. Bien sûr, on doit se souvenir des terribles attentats du 7 octobre. Bien sûr, on doit libérer les otages. Bien sûr, on doit condamner les crimes du Hamas. Mais ce qui est en train de se passer aujourd'hui à Gaza n'est en rien justifiable. On ne tue pas des innocents pour venger des innocents. On ne tue pas des enfants pour assouvir sa haine. Quel avenir s'offre à ceux qui survivront ? Une nouvelle génération traumatisée à qui sera transmise la haine de l'autre, la soif de vengeance, le désespoir des orphelins. Le gouvernement israélien, loin d'affaiblir le Hamas, ne fait que le renforcer et nous éloigne toujours plus de la paix dont il ne veut pas. Nous, notre rôle est d'empêcher cela. Nous avons la responsabilité de défendre le droit international, comme nous le faisons face à l'agression russe, comme nous devions d'ailleurs le faire depuis 75 ans que dure ce conflit. Il faut aujourd'hui sanctionner le gouvernement israélien, stopper les livraisons d'armes et forcer un cessez-le-feu. Nous devons aussi reconnaître l'État de Palestine qui vit aujourd'hui sous occupation. Nous devons financer et soutenir les enquêtes sur les attentats du 7 octobre et sur les crimes israéliens à Gaza. Aux pays occidentaux, je le dis, le reste du monde nous regarde et ils prennent soigneusement des notes. En appliquant un double standard, nous perdons pour longtemps notre crédibilité. Il nous faut dénoncer ce qui se déroule sous nos yeux, au-delà des intérêts de nos pays, car il ne s'agit plus ici de défendre des intérêts, mais de défendre des valeurs qui fondent notre humanité. Voyez les nombreuses images terrifiantes et déchirantes. Écoutez les discours génocidaires des ministres israéliens. Lisez les rapports des organisations internationales. Vous ne pourrez pas, nous ne pourrons jamais dire que nous ne savions pas. Alors agissons maintenant.
Thank you. And the next speaker on the list is Mr. Thanasis Papathanasis from Greece, followed by Mr. Tahir Mirkishvili from Azerbaijan.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, we've gathered here today to address a topic of profound importance, European security today and tomorrow. We found ourselves at a pivotal moment in history, where the sanctity of peace and stability is under direct threat, and the role of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is more crucial than ever. Presently, European security is being challenged by a multitude of issues, from cyber threats and terrorism that transgress national borders to the resurgence of armed conflicts. These problems demand a collaborative and holistic approach. On the OSCE is uniquely positioned to facilitate this through its comprehensive security concept, which encompasses the political, military, economic, environmental, and the human dimensions. Looking ahead, we must consider the OSCE capacity to adapt and respond to emerging threats. The future calls for the fortification of our collective security architecture within Europe and beyond. We need to strengthen our mechanism for early warning, conflict prevention, crisis management, and post-conflict rehabilitation. It's not just about responding to crises, but preventing them from emerging in the first place. Innovation in diplomacy and multilateral cooperation is also vital. As parliamentary representatives, we must advocate for enhanced cooperation with other international organizations and civil society, fostering an environment where dialogue and inclusive decision-making are paramount. Furthermore, our commitment to the principles of transparency, human rights, and the rule of law must remain steadfast. These are the very foundations upon which the OSCE is built and are essential to ensuring a secure and peaceful future for our nations. Together we can build a future where European security is not just a concept, but a tangible reality for all our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Tahir Mirkishvili from Azerbaijan, followed by Mr. Emanuele Loperfido from Italy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, we regret to hear biased speech of United Kingdom representative here to put Ukraine, who lost 20% of its territory, and Armenia, who occupied 20% of Azerbaijan territory, in one basket is out of any logic. We strongly reject these positions. In response to the statement of UK delegation, I would like to state that while making references to the 4 Armenian soldiers, he conveniently passed over in silence that it was Armenian armed forces that, after 5 months of unprecedented calm, opened sniper fire and wounded Azerbaijani border guards. Azerbaijan's response was localized and targeted against the specific military threats. I would like to urge the United Kingdom delegate to make a difference between aggressor state Armenia and agree with country Azerbaijan, whose territories were under belligerent occupation of Armenia for 3 decades. Such statements will not whitewash Armenia's aggression and its consequences, which Azerbaijan is trying to overcome. Azerbaijan, as a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, contributes to the dialogue of civilizations and peaceful coexistence between people of different religions and backgrounds. Azerbaijan is ready to share its experience in the sphere of promotion of peaceful coexistence and diversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Emanuele Loperfido from Italy, followed by Mr. Paul Bartolomé.
Grazie Presidente, onorevoli colleghi. Ci troviamo in un momento critico della storia internazionale, caratterizzato da una serie di crisi che minacciano la pace e la stabilità nel mondo. In questo contesto è fondamentale riaffermare l'importanza del dialogo multilaterale e della diplomazia come strumenti essenziali per affrontare le sfide globali che ci troviamo ad affrontare. Le crisi internazionali attuali dimostrano chiaramente la necessità di un approccio collaborativo e inclusivo nel cercare soluzioni condivise. Nessun paese può affrontare da solo le sfide che ci troviamo di fronte. È solo attraverso un impegno collettivo possiamo sperare di ottenere risultati significativi. La diplomazia svolge un ruolo cruciale in questo processo, facilitando il dialogo e la negoziazione tra le nazioni al fine di trovare soluzioni pacifiche e sostenibili e durature. È attraverso il dialogo e la cooperazione che possiamo superare le differenze e trovare insieme il bene comune. Tuttavia, per essere efficace, il dialogo multilaterale deve essere basato su una sinergia di intenti e un impegno comune verso pace, sicurezza e rispetto dei diritti umani. È solo attraverso una visione condivisa e un impegno reciproco che possiamo sperare di ottenere risultati concreti nel risolvere le complesse sfide che ci troviamo ad affrontare. In questo contesto, l'OSCE svolge un ruolo fondamentale nel promuovere il dialogo e la cooperazione tra i suoi Stati membri e fornisce un forum per il dialogo e la negoziazione su una vasta gamma di questioni di sicurezza e cooperazione, tenendo conto delle differenze culturali dei suoi membri. Differenze che costituiscono al contempo la forza di questa organizzazione. Come membri dell'Assemblea OSCE abbiamo il dovere di lavorare assieme per affrontare le sfide che minacciano la nostra sicurezza e il nostro benessere comune. Questo richiede un impegno sincero verso il dialogo e la cooperazione, nonché il rifiuto categorico all'approccio unilaterale e al ricorso della forza come strumenti per risolvere le dispute internazionali. In conclusione, Presidente, vorrei ribadire un concetto semplice quanto laborioso da raggiungere: l'importanza del dialogo multilaterale e della diplomazia come strumenti essenziali per affrontare le crisi internazionali. Non abbiamo alternative.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Mr. Paul Bartolomé Areni from Andorra, followed by Mrs. Dagbjört Hakonandottir from Iceland.
Thank you, Madam President. The landscape of security is undergoing a profound transformation. Today, I would like to draw your attention to a critical issue that, unfortunately, it has been overlooked by the international community for way too many years. That is the plight of landlocked countries. Dear colleagues, landlocked nations comprise a large group of countries without direct territorial access to the sea. In the OSCE region, the lack of maritime access affects 30% of its members, rendering them landlocked nations. These countries face quite unique threats to their national security. Among these threats, landlocked countries face specific constraints when it comes to taking part in global trade chains, and they also are more exposed to extreme weather events. As a matter of fact, in contemporary geopolitics, accessibility and openness have emerged as two key factors to promote a country's socioeconomic progress. This encompasses the imperative need to develop functional infrastructures and the need to enhance regional interconnectivity. For this reason, the United Nations adopted in 2014 the Vienna Programme of Action for Landlocked Developing Countries. This year, in June 2024, an international conference will convene in Rwanda to evaluate the outcomes of the Vienna Programme and to craft a new strategy for landlocked nations. From my perspective, the OCPA represents a unique platform to help the cause of landlocked nations. So by addressing this issue, we can significantly enhance security within our region. To this end, we propose that the issue of landlocked countries could be brought to the forefront of this Assembly's agenda. It is our hope that during the upcoming annual session in Bucharest, we can build upon the initiative launched by the UN more than a decade ago to devise more concrete actions for landlocked nations. We truly believe in the potential of the OCPA to produce a positive change in this regard. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I still have 12 names on my list here, so I will extend the meeting until 10 past 12. But please try to put your limit your speech in 1 minute. Thank you.
Madam President, millions of Palestinians are now facing mass starvation because of human actions. The humanitarian aid cooperation in Gaza is now on life support. According to the United Nations, it is barely functioning, if functioning at all. Humanitarians and journalists are working under unimaginable conditions, including live fire and obstacles and Israeli restrictions, as well as the total breakdown of public order. This requires urgent action from the international community, which is present in this very room. First and foremost, we must call for an end to the blockade on Gaza, which severely restricts the flow of goods and humanitarian aid. I furthermore condemn all decisions of restrictions on funding for humanitarian organizations operating in Gaza, namely the UNRWA. So far, accusations of alleged strong ties to terrorist organizations have not been proven accurate. Dear Assembly, ending mass starvation in Gaza is a moral priority that requires immediate action. The Israeli government has called for an all-out offensive on the city of Rafah, which would be devastating for 1.5 million Palestinian civilians who are already at the edge of survival. Let me be clear, they have nowhere to go, nowhere to seek safety. Please, let us not stay silent, and debates on who is to blame are unconstructive at this point. And I remind you, international law of armed conflict ensures the rapid and unimpeded passage for humanitarian aid during armed conflict. I call on the international community to use all diplomatic channels to secure an immediate ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker on the list is Mrs. Lilit Galstian from Armenia, followed by Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus. 1 minute, please.
Dear colleagues, in Vancouver we adopted a declaration that calls on Azerbaijan to withdraw its armed forces from the sovereign territories of Armenia for the immediate opening of the Lachin corridor and the release of all detainees. Earlier, both the International Court of Justice and the European Court of Human Rights issued orders of the same content. All these orders, including the Vancouver statement, were undermined by Azerbaijan, accompanied with the territorial claims against Armenia. After a 9-month severe blockade, followed by military attacks without any reliable international security guarantees, leaving homeland of 3,000 years was the only reasonable option available for 120,000 ethnic Armenians, which resulted in the destruction of their society, culture, identity, and political rights. We would have avoided this tragic page of ethnic cleansing by demonstrating political will and holding aggressor Azerbaijan accountable for war crimes. Recently, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe refused to ratify the credentials of Azerbaijan delegation, expressing serious concerns about the state of democracy and condemning the military operation in Nagorno-Karabakh. The conflict is not over. Instead, we must lead the efforts to establish guarantees to secure the return of the Armenian population of Artsakh to their homeland, with due respect for their history, culture, and human rights. Comprehensive support in managing the conflict. This is what we expect from OSCE in Armenia. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Kyriakos Hadiani from Cyprus, followed by Mr. Alex Muscat from Malta.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to emphasize to the positive impact that community, but also states, received by OSCE missions and field operations in Western Balkans region, and I cannot imagine that their efficient work will be limited before the achievement of peace in this region. Therefore, we must ensure their presence and work, especially in this complicated area of Western Balkans. Last, I have the opinion that the possibility to promoting reforms in our organization should be also considered to best reflect current practices and increase the effectiveness of our assembly in accordance with the standards and practice applicable to an international organization. In this context, I truly believe that an assessment of OSCE toolbox is necessary for strengthening parliamentary diplomacy and for developing new tools, especially in times of conflict. Finally, I want to congratulate my country, Cyprus, for the excellent, efficient and succeed leadership of Forum for Security Cooperation of the OSCE. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And the next speaker on the list is Mr. Alex Muscat from Malta, followed by Mr. Ali Öztunç from Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am deeply honored to address you today as Malta assumed the chairpersonship of the OSCE for the first time in our history. I am grateful for the support shown by all for our appointment, we embark on this journey with a profound sense of commitment and responsibility, fully aware of the critical juncture at which we assume this role. Having stepped in to ensure the organization's survival, our primary task is clear, that of addressing the outstanding challenges facing the OSCE, including approving a unified budget for 2024 and selecting new leadership for the organization. Foremost among our priorities is the urgent need to address Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. We also seek to identify synergies between OSCE and the UN Security Council. In conclusion, I call on your support and cooperation as we navigate the challenges ahead. Together, let us uphold the principles of the OSCE and work towards a peaceful and prosperous future for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Ali Öztunç from Turkey, followed by Mr. Andrei.
Evet Sayın Başkan, çok teşekkür ediyorum. Bugün Avrupa konvansiyonel askeri tehditlerden siber savaş, terörizm ve hibrit savaş gibi geleneksel olmayan güvenlik risklerine kadar uzanan sayısız güvenlik sorununa karşı karşıyadır. AGİD ise Rusya'nın Ukrayna'ya saldırmasından bu yana son derece zorlu bir dönem geçirmektedir. Ayrıca Türkiye'deki mülteci sorunu Avrupa için ciddi bir tehdit oluşturuyor. 31 Ocak 2024 tarihi itibariyle Türkiye'de yaşayan Suriyeli sayısı 3.118.841 kişidir. Türkiye'nin sınırlarının ötesindeki mülteci akışını kontrol etmesi ve Avrupa Birliği ile anlaşmaları uygulamak için büyük bir yükümlülüğü vardır. Ama bu yükümlülüğü sadece Türkiye'ye vermek Avrupa açısından yanlıştır. Türkiye'deki mülteci sorununun Avrupa için önemli bir güvenlik tehdidi oluşturduğu da gerçektir ve bunu unutmamak gerekiyor. Süre kısıtlaması nedeniyle son olarak şunu söylemek istiyorum. Evet, Ukrayna'daki çocuklar için üzülüyoruz, ağlıyoruz. Ne zaman ki İsrail ve Filistin'deki çocuklar için de benzer şekilde üzülürsek o zaman dünyayı güzellikle kurtaracağız demektir. Teşekkür ederim.
The next one is Mr. Andrei Coelho Lima from Portugal, followed by Mr. Pavlo Frolov from Ukraine.
Thank you, Pia, dear colleagues. Well, I was nominated by President Pia Kalma as Special Representative for the conflict cycle, to whom I want to thank very much for the opportunity. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to carry on with that honoring and defying mission. Nevertheless, there is a message I wish to share with all of you, a message based on what I was thinking to do if I was given the opportunity to continue. War is by far the worst action of mankind. We kill each other for land, for power, for money, for ridiculous reason. Religions that would make us reflect, understand and love one another are being used quite in the opposite way to try and impose our beliefs to the other. Then we have those whose job is to try and stop these conflicts, those whose function is to mediate, to hear both parts, to listen, even those who don't deserve to be listened. Someone must listen to the murderer or the serial killer to learn, to hear, to understand. At least how was it possible that our society generated someone like this, to help him, to help the victims, to help society itself. We should never give up on that, because diplomacy doesn't make us weak. Diplomacy weakens those who seek isolation to do whatever they want. Alexei Navalny was recently killed in a brutal and inhumane way. He went to Russia at his own will to be arrested. He wanted to show us that we can only fight horrible regimes if we face them, even if in the price of our own life. Dear colleagues, to end, if I could, I was going to try and understand what is not understandable at first sight. I was going to try and hear those who no one wishes to speak to. I was going to be on the field on all existing conflicts within the OSCE area. And why is that? Because that is our job. So my final message to you is do something to make our voices heard. But not only in our countries, where we are protected and safe. Having the courage to say what these autocrats need to hear in their own countries, to their televisions and media coverage, to their people, just like Navalny did. That's what I intended to do. So do it for me, please. Thank you all.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Pavlo Frolov from Ukraine, followed by Mrs. Renata Alt from Germany.
Thank you, Madam President. We are debating today on European security. Currently, there is no European or global security. It has been destroyed by the Kremlin regime. International organizations that should ensure peace, global stability, and human security are blocked by Moscow. I'm talking about the UN Security Council. Russia simply stole the Soviet Union seat in the UN and has used 70% of the unilateral vetoes on decision of UN Security Council. Russia's illegal presence in the UN is indisputable, given the USSR as a state ceased to exist without changing its name and territorial size. It is the only country that has never ratified the UN Charter. Based on the UN Charter and precedents that took place in the UN's activities, there are two possible scenarios for revoking Russia's UN membership. First, the Chinese scenario. On 1971, the UN General Assembly recognized the Republic of China Taiwan as an improper representative of the people of all of China. To recognize Russia as an improper representative of the peoples of the USSR, we need only a simple majority voting at General Assembly. Second, the South African scenario. When the Credential Committee did not confirm the credentials of South Africa from 1969 to 1984 because of apartheid. It is the same way on the ground of inadequate representation of the peoples of the USSR. It is possible not to confirm the credentials of the Russian delegation for many years. The development of such scenario requires political will on the part of the international community. I ask you, dear parliamentarians, to support our Kick Russia Out of the UN initiative, which has already gathered 400,000 signatures worldwide, and increase pressure and isolation of Russian terrorist state on all international platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mrs. Renata Alt from Germany, followed by Mr. Tural Ganjaliev from Azerbaijan.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, wir haben hier über viele Kriegsverbrechen gesprochen, auch über die Verschleppungen der ukrainischen Kinder. Mir ist es wichtig, heute die Aufmerksamkeit auf ein weiteres Kriegsverbrechen der Russischen Föderation in der Ukraine zu lenken, das bis dato zu wenig Aufmerksamkeit erhalten hat. Es geht um die Entführung nicht nur der Kinder, sondern auch von Tausenden ukrainischen Zivilisten aus den besetzten Gebieten, die durch Russland verhaftet, gefoltert und in Strafkolonien nach Russland verschleppt wurden. Die Genfer Konventionen sehen explizit vor, dass die Zivilbevölkerung geschützt werden muss, doch Russland begeht diese Kriegsverbrechen. In Russland haben diese Menschen keinen Schutz. Sie haben keine Chance, bei einem Gefangenenaustausch in ihre Heimat zurückzukehren. Das Rote Kreuz bekommt überhaupt keinen Zugang zu ihnen. Briefwechsel mit der Außenwelt wird ihnen verwehrt oder massiv eingeschränkt. Ich rufe Sie deshalb bitte auf, setzen Sie sich dafür ein, dass Ihre Regierungen Druck auf Russland ausüben und Freilassung auch dieser Menschen fordern. Auch die OSZE muss ihren Beitrag leisten. Ich fordere daher, dass der Moskauer Mechanismus ausgelöst wird, um in Russland Informationen über die Entführungen der zivilen Bevölkerung aus der Ukraine zu sammeln und zu dokumentieren. Wir brauchen unabhängige Ermittlungen, wir brauchen Beweise. Nur so können wir sicherstellen, dass auch dieses grausame Verbrechen der russischen Armee nicht unbestraft bleibt. Vielen Dank.
Dear parliamentarians, I have still the following names on the list in the following order. Mr. Tural Gandaliev, Mr. Ori van de Wouwer, Mrs. Maka Bochorisvili, Mr. Yaroslav Yushurnsnikin and Mr. Dan Barna. And the next speaker is Mr. Tural Gandaliev.
Thank you. Dear Madam Chair, dear colleagues, the speech of the last speaker from Armenian delegation actually exposed and unmasked the official policy of Armenia towards Azerbaijan. And the last speaker not only exposed, but it also destroyed the statement of the previous speaker of Armenian delegation, the lady who was talking about the peace treaty, we are ready to reciprocally recognize each other's territorial integrity. You know, these are the nice words, pleasurable to ears, but in fact Armenia pursues completely different policy towards Azerbaijan. Let me give you two facts. First, Armenia passes over in silence that the preamble of the constitution of this republic has reference to the Declaration of Independence of Armenia from 1990, which openly claims the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. Can you imagine? The official constitution of Armenia openly claims territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. And the second, the official state coat of arms in Armenia has a symbol which openly also claims territories of neighboring Turkey. So we have one country openly claiming the territories of two neighboring countries, Turkey and Azerbaijan. So, dear colleagues, unless Armenia amends its constitution and adjusts its legislation to the OSCE PA standards, the statements made by Armenian MPs remain nothing but hypocritical words. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Ori van der Wouwer from Belgium, followed by Mrs. Maka Bochorisvili from Georgia.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear Madam President, esteemed colleagues, I wish to draw attention to two crucial matters. Firstly, a letter from several individual members of the Young Parliamentarians Network of the OSCE PA delivered to the President yesterday by Ireland Senator Lynn Ruan by urgently calling for an immediate and sustained ceasefire in Gaza. As members of the OSCE PA network of young parliamentarians, it's our responsibility to uphold the principles of this organization, and in this case, that means advocating for a ceasefire in Gaza, aligning with the OSCE's commitment to conflict resolution and peace building. I would kindly ask the President to share this letter with his Assembly and add it to the Assembly certifications of this meeting. Secondly, Philippe Lazzarini, the director of UNRWA, has penned an open letter to the President of the UN General Assembly. In just over 4 months in Gaza, we've witnessed a tragic toll. More children, more journalists, medical personnel and UN staff killed than anywhere else in the world during a conflict. The UNRWA, already at the breaking point, faces funding freezes and calls for dismantling at a time of unprecedented humanitarian needs in Gaza. I implore each of you in this realm of parliamentary diplomacy to use your influence to secure funding for UNRWA from your respective countries. The situation in Gaza is dire and UNRWA stands as a lifeline for thousands. Let our collective support bridge a gap between despair and hope, providing essential services and a chance for a brighter future. Together, let us invest in humanity and ensure the flame of hope continues to burn for those who need it the most. Support UNRWA, let compassion guide our actions and rebuild lives shattered by conflict. I thank you for your attention and urge you to act promptly.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers left, and the first one will be Mrs. Maka Bochorisvili from Georgia, followed by Mr. Yaroslav Yurushnin from Ukraine.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, 2 years has passed since the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine started and continues to challenge the entire European security. Georgia has repeatedly experienced Russian aggression and continues to face Russian occupation and painful consequences of wars even today. We have to be clear and firm over and over again. States should not be punished for exercising the sovereign rights to choose their own future. We have to fight for implementation of norms and principles on which European security is based. Today, the European Union is the best example of how states can coexist peacefully and work together for safeguarding common future. This area of peace, security and prosperity should be enlarged without delay. Georgia expressed its strong will to be part of the European family and just joined the group of candidate countries aspiring for the membership to the European Union. Finally, a couple of words about fight against disinformation. Georgia is facing huge waves of disinformation, and very often, like today, international formats are used for spreading it and creating wrong perceptions about Georgia and its government. We need to be more responsible with it, especially when we need to tackle serious security challenges instead of wasting time at countering disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Yaroslav Yurchushin from Ukraine, followed by Mr. Dan Bana from Romania.
Honorable Presidium, dear colleagues, I could tell about the suffering of Ukrainians, women, children, civilian hostages of Putin regime, lack of weapons. Much has already been said about this, also not enough. But I must be voice of the invisible people not represented here. The enslaved indigenous people, the minority in Russia. More than 50% of such people living in Russia. History should teach us not to repeat mistake. Today we commemorate the sad anniversary of the 80th anniversary of deportation of the Chechen and Ingush people. Entire nation from Northern Caucasus was forcibly resettlement from their homeland. Hundreds of thousands of people were died. Russia are not punished yet. We in Ukrainian parliament understand the difficult situation the indigenous enslaved people in Russia like no one else. We create a special commission to develop mechanism to protect the right of enslaved indigenous people. Right now my colleagues are voting for the resolution condemning the genocide of the Ingush and Chechen people. We call on colleagues from our parliament and OSCE as a whole to pay attention to take special care of the violation of rights of the enslaved indigenous people in Russia. Human rights cannot be limited on the basis of ethnicity. The policy of dehumanization that drove the Ingush and Chechen from their homes 80 years ago must be punished. Russia must be punished for all the genocide it has committed. Freedom for person, freedom for state. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Dan Barna from Romania will conclude our debate.
Thank you, Madam President. Strengthening resilience and enhancing security across the OSCE region these days is not an easy task. But I'm sure that if we remain committed in our efforts to support Ukraine and make OSCE stronger, we will meet our challenges. As you already know, the Parliament of Romania will host the 2024 annual session of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly in Bucharest in 29 June till 3 of July. And the general theme proposed by Romania for this Bucharest session is the role of OSCE in the current security architecture, a parliamentary perspective. The topic represents a continuation of the debates we have these days in Vienna, and I do believe that it's time to start complaining each other. We should focus to the value OSCE is providing in the members' countries, and we should develop these good elements which are already exist. I'm working closely with the President of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and the International Secretariat to prepare our event in Bucharest, and I'm sure there we'll have a good and fruitful dialogue. And now, allow me to invite all of you to a delightful glass of Romanian wine as a teaser for the great event we are preparing in Bucharest. So in the lobby after this event, there are some glasses with wine. And I'm sure we'll have a good meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barna, for your delightful invitation, and thank you all for your very active participation in our debate. The Standing Committee will meet in this room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. See you then. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.